Testing 1 2 3. Testing 1 2 3. Why, hello, Internet. My name is Prunk, and today is the day where we rank every single Ursula's Return card and put it in our tier list. We've done these for each of the sets, and we do things slightly different compared to some other tier lists. If it's your first time joining, we really are talking about like how big of an impact that card made to the metagame. So we're kind of taking a lot of things into consideration of all these new cards. Were they impactful? Were they good? Were they just something you threw in the starter deck until you got something better? Like all the cards that are just coming out, we want to just rank them based on how impactful they were, and not so much just on a individual level, is this card good or bad kind of thing. So we have a lot to go through, and so let's get a ride. I'm going to do this in a little bit different format compared to what I've done in the past, just because I want to be able to like read and talk about the cards a little bit more in detail when I want to. So let's get started with Amber cards. All right, round two, because my audio is apparently cut off. So, all right, let's start this over. And I mean, by over, I make no mistakes. Let's just knock this out of the park. So Augustin Madrigal, he is fine in a starter deck. In draft, you'll need a couple 2/2s, but with no Floodborn shifting character, he's just a vanilla goon. So nothing too special. I would say C to D tier. I'm gonna say C just because he is played in the Madrigal starter deck, and if you're playing a Madrigal deck, then you're gonna be playing this guy as your goon. So yeah, C tier for sure. Daisy Duck, 1/3 goon. So it's just another one. There's not really a shift target for her yet that is really playing and seeing her. So just another general decent card. Just vanilla stat line, 1/3. Let's say C again. Golden Harp is interesting because this card came into format kind of near the end of this all, so we are starting to see some value out of this card. I do think this card is interesting, and we could possibly see more of this in the future. A lot of Steel Songs, they're like always playing a song anyways. This is not a card you play on curve. This is a card you play like turn 3 or 4 after, and you have an extra song in your hand. And then this card can start chipping it away because your opponent's not going to waste removal on this card because they're going to expect it to die because you don't play something. But Steel Song plays like 20 something songs, so like this card is just going to consistently go in and quest for 2, and your opponent's not going to want to have to deal with it until they have to deal with it, and they would have to burn more resources to really utilize this card. I don't think this card's that bad, but it didn't really make a massive impact in our overall meta game. I think this card can be more impactful if people really start experimenting with like their builds a little bit more. So I don't think it's horrible. It's just not amazing. I I'm gonna put it in B tier because this card has won some games when it comes to like big tournaments, because this card just kind of sneaks out those extra lore that you don't want to deal with it. A lot of people don't know how to deal with this card properly. So I think B tier is acceptable, and I think this card can see a lot more play in the future. This is a card that you may want to look out for. I'm trying to hunt down some cold foils of this because I think this can be more impactful than people are giving it credit for. First Aid, this is F tier. Nobody plays this. Atlantica, characters count as having 2+2 for songs, while here, this card is too expensive to really be an impact. And even like the only way I can see this being actually good if this is like a 1 cost to move here, and like that's about it. This card just doesn't see any play in competitive, for casual, or anything. This is just too expensive. Mirabelle Madrigal, she's C tier. She is just good in the starter deck for Madrigals. If you're playing the Madrigal deck, then you're playing Mirabelle Madrigal. Easy as that. C tier. Stitch. It is a generic 2/3. We do have plenty of those, but this one just does. It can possibly be a shift Rockstar target if you are playing a little bit more of that aggro spam with shift or Stitch. Then yeah, sure you're playing that, but we haven't really seen Rockstar Stitch in our meta for 3 sets now, roughly. Just it's not as impactful as it was. And it's kind of disappointing because I really love the Stitch. It's great artwork. It's a standard vanilla. This card will be drafted in a draft format because it's got a good stat line. And it's Stitch. Everyone loves Stitch. I'm going to say D tier because I don't have the heart to put it in F tier. I think this card can see play in sealed and like drafting decks, but that's unfortunately it. Ursula the Vanessa. So this card has a shift target that came out this set. We'll talk more about that later. But this is probably one of the best 2-drops that Steel Song can have. This allows you to sing Zeus and pop out early threats. So like if the people are going to drop Sisu on turn 3, well, you have the answer for that with Ursula. If they drop a Fox, if they do what XYZ, like this card is just always going to answer a lot of things because you're able to sing Zeus. you're often just singing Zeus. So there is that. Like I played like a red yellow song deck, and it was pretty neat being able to sing like Be King Undisputed, and then like kind of taking out their Bucky. So like turn one, I had a turn one play where turn one small Cinderella for Ballroom. They shifted in on turn two. They shifted into their Bucky or Diablo combo. I discarded something. I had this on the field, and so I was able to sing Storm Rage on to pop their Diablo, and then a Be King Undisputed on turn three to take out the Bucky. So like there are some potentials with this card outside of Steel Song as well. This card is easy A tier for Steel Song. This is one of the most important cards in their engine just to help gain control. And if you're going first and play this card turn two, I feel like you have a strong control with Steel Song. A tier, easy. Bruno's Return. When you return a character card from your discard hand, then remove 2 damage. This card has never seen play. This is F. Miracle Candle. So this card is interesting because I think on paper everyone's going to say this card's bad. This card is not bad. It's just you build around it. This is a good starter deck card. This is a good aggro deck card. Although you typically want to be able to top deck this into this like mid game as aggro when you still have a couple characters out in the field. It basically is just your version of a goat. If you can just have a few characters on the field and say I have quest, and play this card and then banish this card because I have 3 characters and gain 2 lore, that is huge amount of pressure for an aggro deck to put out for 2 lore. So if a card in an aggro deck says gain 2 lore, you're probably playing it. And I think this card can be even more impactful next set. So this is a card to watch out for. It obviously did not make much of an impact, but this is a solid starter deck card. I'm going to put this in C tier. Record Player. This card... Okay, everyone's going to say F tier, and I understand why. This card is actually really good if you start playing around with some more casual decks. The fact that this card says whenever you play a song, chosen character gets -2 until the start of your next turn. So this is a mini Kita effect every time you play a song. And so it also says you can Stitch counts as +1 singer. That's not that big of a deal. So this in a red-yellow singing deck or song deck is really impactful because now you're able to play Brawl, you're able to play Madame Medusa, you're able to hit with Sisus. Like you're able to do a lot of extra stuff that your opponent's not going to be expecting, all because you took away the -2 attack. So this card made no impact in the meta, but I want to give it a little bit of a spotlight because I don't think people really think about the potential this card has, and it's only going to get better as more Ruby like stat cards kind of come into play. I think this card as an standalone card is worth a C tier, but we're not talking about standalone. We are talking about a meta impact, and this card, unfortunately, has to be built around completely. In a casual deck, it's okay. It's not something I'm happy to top deck, but it's something I'm happy to see if my builds are going well. It's kind of like a win more card in almost. But it's not something you can really play in sealed, and it's not something you can really play in a draft. So with like 3 of the formats, this card is dead. Unfortunately, this card is F tier overall, but I wanted to give this card a little bit of a highlight because there is a lot of potential with this card. So something to consider if you're building something around like a Kita deck or a Gantu deck or something along those lines. Underworld. This card was seeing some play with the red-yellow Jim Hawkins deck. I think this is probably the worst target for Jim Hawkins, being a 2-drop. Yeah, you can move some people here, and then you can gain some stuff. And this card does give you recursion, which that red-yellow deck desperately needs. But it's not impactful enough to start swinging a game into your favor. This is just, I'm behind, I'm out of cards, I need to move somebody here to quest, and like, oh, I only have 5 lore and quests anyway, or sorry, 5 ink anyways to play with. Is it really worth me moving 2 and 3 and passing my turn just to get something back to my hand? I don't think so. I think this card is a D tier card at best. It's just too expensive to play, and it's made no impact on anything. In a draft, the only reason I say D tier is because in a drafting format, when you're top decking everything anyways, this could be okay, but at the same time, it's probably too slow even a draft deck. Alma Madrigal, she's C. I mean, she is a searcher for Madrigal cards. You're playing Madrigals in the starter deck, and if this is your first starter, then you're playing this card. Easy enough. She quests for 2, so not bad. C tier. Donald Duck. It's a musketeer. So this card is great in aggro. If you're playing yellow purple aggro, this card on 3 is can be devastating. Giving a Maleficent an extra lore or Pinocchio a lore from like last turn, so like he's questing for 4, and then you already have your one drop deals like to deal with. This card is terrifying to see on turn 3. Um, with that said, it like aggro is starting to see. We're gonna start seeing a lot more aggro decks. I feel like next set. And I'm going to say this card is easy B tier because it's not crazy impactful on its own, but it puts so much pressure on the board that you guys can't deal with my 1/1 characters because I got this duck on the field. And oh, by the way, that duck on the field, he's still hit. And now I'm questing for 4 with my Pinocchio. Haha. It's only for that turn, but like, you gain an extra 4. So like, that can be the difference with an aggro. If you're trying to win by turn 5, this card can make that difference. Felix, you're playing him in Madrigal. It's a C tier card. He's a really bad C tier card, but if you're playing the Madrigal deck, you're playing this character. Gaston, this card disappointed me because I felt like it would be so strong, and it's not really this card's fault. It's red yellow just fell off a lot in this meta. We did not see nearly as many Mufasa decks this set as we could have seen them as last set, and I blame Bucky because just red yellow couldn't compete with green steel, and it's really unfortunate. I'm really hoping that we start seeing some more next set because red yellow is just a super fun deck combos to play. Um, it is a better version of Doc. It does allow red yellow to really actually like play and get to your big characters. I don't think this card is horrible, but it didn't make as big of an impact as I thought it should have, and maybe that's just because of green steel. Um, I like this card a lot. I'm going to put it in B tier, but that's probably my own bias. It could probably go in C. It does just make the red-yellow deck work really well to play those big characters. Like on turn 4, dropping a 6, like it can be pretty helpful. Or like realistically, you kind of want to drop like not Rockstar Stitch, the Carefree Surfer Stitch because of this guy too. So like so this guy comes on 3. Turn 4, you ink. So yeah, I guess you have to play a 6 drop at that point. Like this card can be really good. I'm gonna put it in B tier. Julieta is one of the cards that I put in almost every yellow deck, just because it says draw. And it heals too, and it's a good card to come out on 3. A lot of people are still playing like the Mother Gothel who damages herself, and even if you're playing like a Steel Songless, like chances are my Ursula, I might run into like a 2/1 Chernabog that they kept on the field or something or whatever, and then heal her up. Like this card says heal, and I'm sorry, this card says draw. This is more than a starter deck card. I think this is a pretty big staple that you'll see in a lot of yellow decks just because you need that draw power in yellow. I think this card is close to A tier. It's not impactful enough in the entire game because it's only really drawing you 1, but it does allow you to make some favorable trades. So like high B tier, low A tier. I'm gonna say B just because I don't want to piss off people. Um, but I think this card is very underrated for what she does. Max, just -1 attack for, or costs 1 less to play if you have an Prince Eric. There's not many good Prince Erics, but this card is insane as a 2-drop if you do have a 2-drop Prince Eric on there. But the problem is you're not really playing a good Prince Eric until turn 2 anyway, so then you're not playing this on curve. Then you have to play something else. Like, this card's made no impact on the meta. Poor Pooch, we're going to put him in F tier. Prince Eric, 3/3 for 3. He's basically just Hercules, but there's no good shifting Eric character yet, so he's going to sit in F tier. Sign the scroll. Each opponent who may choose and discard a card. For each opponent who doesn't, you gain 2 lore. So it's either ripping a card out of your hand, in which you're going minus and he's going minus, or you're gaining 2 lore. It's pretty bad. I don't even want to play this really in draft. Maybe play this in draft, I guess. I don't know. But I'm going to say F tier. Ariel, Singing Mermaid, Singer 7, and Quest for 2. Her stat line is pretty bad, but the fact that she sings for 7, you feel like should be impactful. Like the only time this card is really live is if you're playing a lot of like the sing-along songs, and those just didn't really make too much of an impact. So I'm gonna put this card actually in D tier. It's not really something I'm excited to play. If I'm drafting or something, I don't have that big of cost of songs in most cases, so Probably not really good in that. I haven't built a sealed deck around, or not sealed, a constructed deck with her in it really either. There's just better things to do on turn 4 than play a Singer 7. Because what are you singing that's that big in most cases? Cogsworth, this is another character that says -2 until the start of your next turn. Again, I feel like there's more potential there, and it does curve into blue if you played the blue Cogsworth to play it shift into 5, which isn't really like I guess he shifts into 3 after the fact because he's like shift 3 and then plays. Um, yeah, like it's I don't think this card is horrible. This is something I would probably grab in like sealed in draft, but this is not being put in a constructed deck really at all. This is definitely I would say this is low D tier. I don't want to put him in F because it definitely has use. Daisy Duck. Whenever you play this character, each opponent chooses and discards a card. It is more discard. Discard's not really fun. Yellow green just never made that as explosive as that deck can be, and it can wipe out a game by turn 3. It's this card by itself isn't really that great. It's a You Have Forgotten Me with legs, but it's one -1 card. Like it can be devastating. It can be a good top deck too, just to help. Like if your opponent has like 2 or 3 cards in their hand, like it can be a good rip. But overall, this is probably more C tier. The Musketeer engine just isn't really doing anything crazy yet. I don't think it's bad. I don't think it's great. It's just more of I'm playing a discard deck, so I'm throwing in Daisy Duck. Solid enough. C tier. Goofy, Musketeer, same kind of logic. Musketeers just aren't doing anything in the metagame. They're not making any big impact. They're not even really seeing. I'm not seeing them at my locals. So if somebody's playing Musketeers at their locals, let me know what you came up with. Whenever you play a character with Bodyguard, ready this character. He can't quest for the rest of the turn. Yeah, I mean, like, the fact that he's uninkable just makes it so he's not playable. Like, I would rather have this card been inkable and then quest for 1, but he doesn't. And he's not even a bodyguard himself. So, like, he just readies when he is a bodyguard, but then he can't even quest anyways. So, like, there's just too many things wrong with this card. I don't think this is really seeing play. You might play this in draft, but I'm going to say this is F tier. Mickey Mouse, leader of the band. When you play this character, a chosen character gains support, and he has support. This card's just bad. It's not a good stat line for a 4-drop. It's not impactful enough usually for a 4-drop to either. Turn 4 is just very, very important in Lorcana, and this doesn't do anything. And it kind of sucks too because this is a promo. I don't even think this is a good-looking card. I don't know what's wrong with Mickey's face, but I just don't like looking at this character or this card. This is an F tier card. I don't think anyone can argue that. Ursula, Eric's Bride. So this card, the other Ursula is great, and I said A tier, I believe. Ursula, Eric's Bride. Discard a song card. You may discard a song to play this character on top of Ursula. So you can play her on turn 3, and then instantly quest, and it allows you to discard a non-character card from their hand. So this card can be pretty devastating, especially on turn 3 if you play this, because you are able to rip a Brawl out of somebody's hand. You're able to rip the Be Prepared. You're able to do, like, this card can put on a lot of pressure. And she quests for 2. Like, this card is pretty solid, especially if I think if you're playing Yellow-Green, this is an auto-include. I think if you're playing Steel Song, you could possibly fit her in if you want to be a little cheeky and you don't want to really play bare necessities. I think this card's pretty solid. This is definitely, in my opinion, more of an A tier card. I think that people, if green steel could get around, I'm sorry, green yellow can get a little bit more consistent next set, I think this card is only going to be more of a problem in the future. So I'm going to say this is definitely, I said A tier. I'm going to say B tier. I think B is completely fine. It hasn't made that big of an impact, but when this card rips things, it makes a big impact in your games. I've lost because of this card in a big tournament. So I'm going to say B tier. Lost in the Woods, all opposing characters -2 until the start of your next turn. Again, another start until your next turn. Combos with with song decks. I'm sorry, yellow-red songs. Like, it's a pretty neat card. I do kind of wish it was more of a cantrip where it lets you draw. I think it is a little expensive, but for a 2-drop Ursula can sing this card, and then you can brawl something big on their turn. So, Lost in the Woods, again, nothing meta or this is just a casual deck that I've been able to make a card that I've been able to make work, but this is probably a D tier. It's not F because it's playable, but this is D. We get to our Cinderella. I think this is our first legendary we talked about. Whenever this character sings a song, your other princesses get +1 questing lore this turn. She is a singer 9. This card I do not think has been in a single competitive deck at all. Um, Turn 5, like weak stats, she dies to Medusa next turn. Doesn't really get any actual effect out. Singer 9 is overkill. I don't know what you're singing for 9. And like even the sing along songs don't usually go that high, like they really need to. Uh, I think this card is. It makes sense that it's a legendary. It's a cool effect. It's a unique effect. This card has seen really no competitive or casual play. I'm going to put this in F tier. Minnie Mouse, Musketeer Champion. This card I think is great. When it's a bodyguard, a quest for 5 or quest for 2. When you play this character, banish chosen opposing character with 5 attack or more. It is yellow's outs. It is the Criminal Minds kind of card where you're just able to pop a big threat. It takes out Tamatoa for you for yellow decks. It takes out the dragons. It takes out a lot of problem cards. And this card is so necessary in the meta, especially for this color. I think this gives red yellow a good edge because a lot of the red cards do not have clean outs to anything big. Just because a lot of them are Medusa. I mean, a lot of people are playing Medusa. Some are Tremaines and things like that. But like this card allows you to out some problematic cards. I think this card's an A tier card. I think it's very underappreciated of how good this card is. It is exactly what yellow needed. Mirabelle Madrigal. So this one's a little bit better. This is the starter deck card. You're only playing this again in the Madrigal card decks. But this card is a 3/5 with support, and your other Madrigal characters get +1. So if you're dropping this on turn 5 and like your opponent has kind of ignored a lot of your Madrigal characters, then yeah, this card's super impactful in the meta. So I think that because of it, this card is probably she's still C tier. Like you're playing this in the starter deck, and base. I don't think this card comes in the starter deck, but you're playing this card as an upgraded put into your starter deck, and that's fine. Like I think it does exactly what it should be doing, but it's made really no competitive viability. So we'll put that in C. Pluto, yeah, great dog. When you play this character, you may remove 3 damage. It's seen again, no real play. I think you could fit this in a Mufasa deck because it's not a bad card to like even top deck. You get an extra heal off if you need to with some damage characters. It does quest for 2. It's got a good stat line where it doesn't die to Medusa, but nobody is playing this and nobody's playing the super dog. So I am going to put this in D tier, unfortunately. Another good puppy, but just not impactful enough. Cinderella, we get to see the Enchanteds. Prince Eric. This card has not seen anything. This card's just F tier. While you have a character named Ursula in play, this character gains bodyguard and gets +2 defense. You can shift it on top of the other Eric on curve, which is kind of neat, but this is F. Nobody's playing this card. Mickey Mouse, Musketeer Captain. So the Musketeers really trying to make it work. They just never did. Competitively, casually, nothing. When you play this character, if you use shift to play him, you may draw a card for each character with body card you have in play. You probably have one other bodyguard in play if you shifted this character into it. So a 7-cost uninkable that allows you to draw 1, maybe 2 if you were lucky. And then you just can quest for 2. Like this card dies to Medusa. It's seen no impact again. Unfortunately, I feel like yellow got really shifted with the legendaries this set. It's a cool looking card. It is a musketeer, which is a cool archetype. It just doesn't work as an uninkable. It doesn't work as a draw engine. This is an F tier legendary again. Look at this family. Look at it. It's great. Look at the top 5 cards of your deck. Reveal up to 2 characters and put them in your hand, and put the rest in the bottom of the deck. This card has seen some play in Steel Song. It's definitely seen play in my red yellow. But overall, this is just a pretty mid card. Like it is draw that I feel like the decks desperately need. I'm surprised that we didn't see this in the locations deck that much because you are getting some decent field presence and you kind of need that character boost. So I'm surprised this isn't seeing more play. I would again say this is more of a starter deck card, C tier. Like there are better options for you to want to sing. It's not unplayable. I think it's pretty good, but it just hasn't made that big of an impact. And that is our Amber list. Whew, 20 minutes in, and we're only 1 color in. God, these videos are so long, and I was talking. All right, let's start on to the next one. All right, my voice couldn't handle the last one. So I changed in a new day, but not for you. Anyway, so we are on the purple card, amethyst cards, and Magic Brooms. I feel like this is a pretty solid card that helped really make broom decks viable. Although broom decks aren't really seen as a competitive meta, they did make them playable. And a lot of people are playing brooms in just the Ruby Amethyst, which is seeing extreme competitive play. Some people opt in to play 4 of these and 2 Churnabogs, or 4 Churnabogs and 2 of these Magic Brooms. Either way, this card right here is very, very good. It's just a solid all-around purple card that can be splashed into countless decks. As far as meta changing, this does not really make that big of an impact on the meta in the sense of it makes your deck more consistent, but it's not a card that people are particularly building around. So for those reasons, because it's seen in every Ruby Amethyst deck and or just I'm sorry, in general Amethyst decks, I gotta say this card is easy A tier. It doesn't have to be a crazy effect. It just the fact that this is a good one drop that allows you to draw when you play another character, it just adds a whole bunch more consistency. And the fact that it's Broom helps that archetype up where people can really build a Broom deck. So A tier I think is a pretty fair spot for a Magic Broom Illuminary Keeper. Swing into action, chosen character gains rush. It's a decent draft card, but it doesn't really see any play outside of that. I would say D tier. Casa Madrigal. So funny enough, I don't even think this card is that good in the Madrigal deck, to be honest. If you start your turn here, it then gains a lore. It's a 1-drop location. It costs 1 to move them into. I don't even think this is a starter deck card. It's not really draftable either, in my opinion. So I'm just going to say F tier. Magical Maid, it's a 2/2 for 2, a quest for 2. It's a nice little aggro card, but overall no impact. And we have a bunch of cards that are like this that have never really seen play. Maybe in draft we can say a D tier, but it's not horribly impactful into anybody. We have plenty of cards like this, so D to F tier is fair. Pico, I have never seen anybody ever play this card. This is F. So Ursula, Sea Witch. So she is a decent body, and then it does have the Challenger for a 2-drop. And we do have the purple Ursula that does shift, but that doesn't mean that anybody is playing this card whatsoever. I think that her being here is important if you really want to make an Ursula themed deck, but there are just better options overall in the 2-stat line. This is an F tier card again. It just, even though you can Bloodborne shift on 5, this card doesn't do enough to impact your gameplay in any format. Yen Sid, we got our first purple legendary. So Yen Sid, as I kind of discussed with the brooms, brooms aren't a meta deck. However, this card existing makes brooms a competitive deck. And the key difference is meta, obviously, you're going to go in and you're going to be seeing those in your top cuts for like massive tournaments. Brooms aren't quite there yet, but this card, because of this card existing, you are going to start seeing brooms at your locals. You're going to see people playing brooms on League. You're going to see fun little decks with these, with Yen Sid built in. Yen Sid just turns everything live. And honestly, he's not even that bad of a like in a Ruby Amethyst. You can splash him in. I've tried splashing him in with like a Blurple with a few brooms, and he's not a bad statted character. And the fact that when he comes into play, if you play the 1-drop broom, you do get to draw. Then you can pop that other broom, allows you to draw again. Like it's not a bad opening 2 turns. But is he meta impactful? No, but he does turn a deck live that desperately needed it. I'm gonna say this is a B tier card. A deck is built around it, and we are seeing those decks pretty common, I think, in a local league play. But you're not going to be topping any massive tournaments with the Broom deck yet, unfortunately. But thanks to Yen Sid and the support he's given, I think we are able to play Broom decks consistently because of him. So B tier, I think, is totally fair. Poor Unfortunate Souls return chosen item, location, or 2 cost from their hand. It is a song. I'm surprised this didn't see a bit more play. It is really good to kind of set your opponent back. It can arguably be a better befuddle, although more expensive, but the fact that you can bounce a location, although we're not seeing many like 2-drop locations that are hugely impactful, and we're not seeing any like random 1-cost items that we would actively want to bounce, and that's kind of why this card hasn't seen much play, I think, overall. I think it's okay. It's fine in a draft format. Like if you didn't open like a 2, then you have this to bounce their 1-drop. So it can be okay. But overall, I think this is just a D. Mystical Rose banishes item. Chosen character named Beast gets +2 lore. If you have a chosen character named Bell in play, remove 3 damage counters from chosen character to chosen opposing character. This allows you to move some damage around. If you have Beast and Bell, the damage moving stuff isn't that viable yet. I think it's a cool concept, and we did see the Bell coming up that does allow us to move things around. That did see some good play in Purple Steel, but this card never really followed suit. Doesn't do enough to really make it worth it. It is just two. Basically, it's a 2 cost for 2 lore if you have a Beast out, which is or just if you have Bell, then you're moving damage around, which you probably already moved your damage around anyways. Just not impactful. We're gonna say F tier. Rose Lantern, basically the same card. Mythical Rose versus the Rose Lantern. Pay 2. It's a 2 cost, inkable. Pay 2. Move 1 damage counter from chosen character to opposing character. Nothing. Again, nothing special. This can be okay in like a sealed format, so I'm gonna say D tier because it is playable if you're playing sealed. But overall in our metagame has seen no play. I think D is generous, so we'll go with that. Trident's Trident. This card did see some play early on in the format. People were kind of experimenting with this card and trying to figure out, okay, how do I out with like big Sisus? How do I get around certain cards? And this was an answer for the purple player, purple. If you're playing like to deal with like Diablo, so if you play turn 1 Pascal or something, or if you're playing Pegasus, just allowing you to basically get a trade in on the Diablo. But overall, it was just a little too slow. I don't think it's a bad card, but it did see some meta relevance at the beginning. It just quickly kind of fell out of favor. I'm going to say this is a D tier card. Yensids, we already talked about them. Antonio Madrigal, not really that great of a stat line. It's just played in the Madrigal starter deck, so C tier. Bell, when you play this character, move up to 1 damage from a chosen character to opposing character. Just more damage moving. Has seen no competitive or casual play. It can be used in a sealed format, but so for that, it's a D tier card. You're going to kind of see that same argument. If it can be played at all, it's usually D. If it's unplayable, we're putting it in F tier. Elsa, Storm Chaser. So this card I really wanted to get to work, and it does a lot, but it does a lot very slowly. So the idea behind this card, you play her on turn 3, and then turn 4, you play like a goat or a rabbit, give it Rush and Challenger, let it run into something, and you would think that that would be impactful, and it can help. But usually on turn 4, there's not that big of a threat, unless they threw down like a Queen's Castle or something. But even then, like at best case, then you play a goat and it runs into Queen's Castle for 6 damage, which means it's still not directly outed, which means your other characters hopefully are on the board to help clean up a Queen's Castle. But a smart player is not playing Queen's Castle on 4 in most cases anyway, especially if you have board presence. There's just a better 3-drop, aka Fox, and she's just too slow, and we don't see her as a shifting target really often either because she's uninkable. This card has a lot of playability. Just didn't quite hit the mark as much as I really wanted this card to do. It's always nice as an option, and maybe she'll find her place later if we get another Floodborn Elsa that does a little bit more. But until then, I think just D tier is completely fine for Storm Chaser. She's playable, but not really excelling at anything. The Float Sam cards, when this character is banished in a challenge, return this card to your hand. So we got this as like a little bit of the hey from last set. Your character named Jet Sam gains when this character is banished in a challenge. Return this card to your hand as well. You're playing this in the Float Sam deck. I would say starter deck tier because there is a deck that plays them. If you're playing the Float Sam and Jet Sam stuff, it can be in like a whole Ursula's Bounty deck. It has its theme. It has its niche. And as far as impact in the meta, obviously not much. But in terms of just casual play, this card does see casual play with those kind of decks. So I encourage people to try out the Flotsam and Jetsam decks. They're not crazy good, but if you just want a fun deck to play on this last week, then try it out. Jetsam, this one's Challenger +2. Your other Float Sams gain Challenger +2. This one's inkable, so it's a little bit more, but again, it's no more than a C tier card. The combo is just okay. There are better things to be playing on turn 3 in most cases than a Jetsam and Floatsam. They will eventually get their day. I feel like we just need like one more set to push these guys out, and we can probably see some kind of viability. But until then, it's a casual deck through and through. Magic Broom, 2/4. This card is not even really seen in the Broom deck. It just doesn't do anything for a 3 cost. Just because it says it's a Magic Broom doesn't mean that it's going to be live in the Broom deck. So I think this card is F tier. Marshmallow gets +1 attack for each card in your hand. So kind of just reverse Sisu. This, unlike Sisu though, this card is uninkable, and this card doesn't even have a Floodborn shifting character yet. It is actively weaker as a 3 health character. This card is just overall bad Sisu in every possible way. It on turn 3 you probably have like 4 cards in hand roughly if you're playing purple. So like becomes a 4/3 on 3 that's uninkable. Not that great. So I'm gonna say F tier for Marshmallow. If this card was inkable, it could possibly see play, but it's not, so therefore it's F. Peter Pan Shadowfinder. So this guy I'm really glad we get to see. This card lost me a set championship because they were able to out my Diablo. Just on turn 3, drop the surprise, here's Peter Pan Shadowfinder. He had it every single game. Every time I played it, I tapped a Diablo, this card was found its way to my opponent's hand. Shout out to Noah, who really got to play this card. Funny thing is, I'm the one who suggested put these cards in your deck. This card is great. I mean, this is the anti-Diablo card, which identified the meta. We'll talk more about Diablo later. But this was almost an auto-include in a lot of purple decks because you just needed to find an out for the Diablos in the set. We'll have to talk about Diablo more. I don't want to get too much in detail about him. But Peter Pan, Rush, and Evasive, and your other characters with Evasive gain Rush. Really great card overall. This card didn't make as big. This card was the anti-Diablo, and we see this card in a lot in Ruby Amethyst, and we do see this in like green purple, which was great in green purple. I'm gonna say this card is A tier. It wasn't a card that people were building their decks around, but it was a card that found its way into many decks just to answer the key problem card of this set. So you guys kind of know my idea on what Diablo is going to be. Ursula's plan. Each opponent chooses and exerts one character. Those characters can't ready at the start of the next turn. F. It doesn't see any play. Ursula's Blair. This card does not see any play anyways. The character's name Ursula gets +1 lore. Character gets the bounce of Spanish tier. Yeah, this is and it's uninkable. That's F. Bruno Madrigal. So sticking to the format of there is a deck built around this guy. Card's pretty good. He is, even as a standalone card. If you're building your deck, you kind of know what's coming up. In most cases, you're probably playing Ursula's Cauldron. You're probably playing things that are going to let you, like if you're playing massive amount of puppies or something. Then this card can be okay. It is a evasive character. Name it and tap it to name a card. Reveal the top card of your deck. If it's the card you named, then you gain 3 lore. That is not a once per turn. It just taps it, and if you have ways to untap it, it gets kind of nutty. I'm gonna say that this card is in its own deck. It is an A tier card because this card can be crazy oppressive if you have built your entire deck around it. As far as meta impact and what this card has done for the meta, nobody's worried about Bruno Madrigal decks. They have their inherent weakness, and so because of that, this guy is probably C tier overall when it comes to meta impact. But as a card, this is a phenomenal powerhouse. He has his own deck built around him that can be pretty scary. So shout out to Utrip, who have built a pretty scary deck around Bruno. But overall, the card has made not too much of an impact on the metagame. And it has done it on our casual play a little bit. So I'm going to say C tier. Possibly give it an edge to B, but I'm going to call it at a C. Camille Madrigal, at the start of your turn, you may choose one. I like choose effects. They're really cool. She either gets +1 lore or Challenger +2. She's got a decent stat line, but she's like the Medusa card of just, oh, you're going to hit this card with a Medusa. This guy, it's a good card in a Madrigal deck. That's enough to put it into C tier. It's not a horrible card as a standalone, but it really hasn't made any impact whatsoever. It's just really played in that casual deck. Dolores. So this card right here has been toiled with a lot. A lot of people say no. At the beginning of the format, people were like, no, this is better than Rabbit. No, this is worse than Rabbit. I think if you're playing an aggro deck, this card is better than Rabbit, and you like to see the fact that it's inkable. The fact that Quest for 2 is great, and often your opponent does have a draw card or an exerted card anyway, so the draw card is usually pretty live, and when it's not live, it's ink. So I think Dolores is a great card overall. I'm going to put her into A tier because She is taking Rabbit, which is one of the best cards printed, um, and saying this is a good alternative replacement for this card. Not crazy impactful on the meta, but this card is so powerful and it does allow you to build your decks in a little bit different ways. I'm going to say this card is A, maybe high B, but I think A tier is definitely a fine place for Dolores. I do splash her in a couple decks instead of Rabbit because I do think this card is pretty viable. Luis, you're playing her, the Madrigals, C tier. Potts, you're not playing this card whatsoever. This is F tier, unfortunately. Bell, so this card right here single-handedly gave Purple Steel a big, big boost, and it made a splash. It wasn't a card that people were building around, and it's definitely not really. It hasn't dominated the meta, but because of this card alone, I think it really opened up a lot of eyes to Purple Steel. And because of that, like being able to combo with Smee and move damage around a little bit, and it is a scary threat. It passes the Medusa test, so it doesn't die to Medusa right away. Um, I think this card is easy A tier. Again, not something you build your entire deck around, but this card made it literally single-handedly, in my opinion, brought back Purple Steel as a competitive deck. This Bruno, when you play this character, chosen gains when this character is banished in a challenge. Seeing no play whatsoever. The fact this guy's uninkable is unplayable, so we're gonna say F tier. Isabel. Okay. When I first saw this card, I'm like, holy crap, this is a phenomenal card. It allows you to play control, like with your like Madam Mims and stuff like that, and your goats and rabbits to make good trades, and then just allow yourself to quest with this evasive character that has a good stat line. Um, but overall, she did kind of fall a little flat. I do think that there is a place in the meta for her. She is a terrifying card to see her on the field if your opponent's especially already in control. But because of that, she feels like more of a win more card. She's definitely not C tier, but maybe low B in terms of meta impact. She does spark some fear when you drop this character onto the field, purely because she's evasive, and the fact that she's going to quest for like 4 when she does go off. I think we can put her in B tier pretty safely. Peppa Madrigal, again, uninkable, 1/5 when you play this character, exert chosen character. This is just kind of a uninkable, weird statted Ursula. Um, yeah, we'll just put this in F tier. We don't have to talk about it. Float Sim and Jet Sam, discard 2 cards, and this character counts as both Jet Sim and Float Sam. Horrible value. Even in a Float Sim and Jet Sim deck, this card I can't imagine really being valued. What, you're going to give it Ward, or you're going to give it Evasive to quest for 2 after discarding 2 cards in your hand? I don't think so. This card's F. Tick Tock. Funny enough, I actually thought about trying to build something around this guy because the 4/7 stat line is scary, but the fact he only quests for 1 just never really made a big impact. In a closed format, this card is terrifying. This is definitely an evasive eater if you're playing in, like, again, a sealed or a draft, but overall, we can say that this card is probably D tier. All right, our promo card for set champs, our Queen to Queen. There's an enchanted version, there's a set championship version of this card. How does she fare in the meta? So Ursula Sea Queen Witch, on paper, is a phenomenal card. When this character quests, exert chosen character, so that way allows you to make better trades with things that you probably wouldn't want to. Other characters can't sing songs, so that's completely shutting down an entire deck that's in the meta of Steel Song. And she quests for 3. She survives Madame Medusa. She has a 7 stat line body. 4 attack is nothing to scoff at. She is shiftable on turn 5. So why is this card bad? I think the problem comes down to is when this character quests exert chosen character, the fact that you have to target. We really, really just needed this card to say your opponent must exert all characters or something along the lines of like the new Anna that's coming out. She just doesn't do enough when she is shifted and when she quests. And so she's really just a stat monkey at this point. So as a stat monkey, she is great. She's there to close out some games. In green purple, this card is a great, great, great game closer, and just a major threat that you're dropping in the field. But she doesn't have a good turn 4 shift or turn 4 Ursula yet, which is surprising. Um, so I think if until we get that, this card won't see massive competitive play. This is not a bad card by any means, but this card made no impact on meta decks whatsoever. I think this card is B tier at best, unfortunately, which is sad because they're everything on, if you as a standalone card, looking at just this card by itself, I think any player would be like, yeah, this card is and this card's A or S tier. Like she does everything. Like she does so much. But she never really made that big of an impact and she is very slow. So because of that, I think B is as high as I could possibly put her in. And that's unfortunate because this card is pretty cool. There's the Ursula. Second star to the right. So I immediately saw this card and I thought, wow, Jafar is getting a phenomenal deck. And I thought we were going to see more Jafar decks this set. Other than the one guy who's on Facebook all the time playing Jafar, this didn't make any impact. I have seen some interviews about it, and he's like, oh yeah, I've maybe gotten to sing it like twice in tournament and stuff, and really close out games with it. And twice isn't enough to really say this card made a big impact on the meta. I think it's a great card for this color. I think it's not a bad option that this card exists. But as far as impact on the meta, we're going to have to put this in D tier. And probably not the prettiest looking enchanted. So that is all of our purple. What was that? Like 20 minutes again? Yep, 20 minutes. All right, we're just keeping this a solid pace. Let's go into green. All right, let's talk green. So Diablo, when you play this character, you may look at each opponent's hand. So on paper, this card feels underwhelming. However, this is an A tier card. Knowledge is power in Lorcana. Knowing what your opponent's going to play, when they're going to play it, what colors they're playing, if it's game one, any competitive format. I think this card, without its shift target, is A tier. This is uh, this is basically what I want in a one drop. It is a body on the field. It'll have a good shift target later on. It's got an okay stat line at a 1-2. I mean, it's what it is. It's gonna help deal with aggro if you're facing an aggro character. It's gonna allow you to make some kind of trade. But just giving you that game knowledge, I think a lot of new players do not respect enough. Just counting out like, okay, let's see what's coming up and what's in their opening hand. Seeing, hey, this is their one drops, these are the two drops, these are the three drops. Hey, look, they have a Flynn in their hand on turn 2, they have a Sisu on their hand turn 3, so that means that I have to have something to counter their Flynn next turn, so I know not to ink this card next turn where I wanted to ink it originally. Knowledge is power in Lorcana. This card gives you that knowledge. I think this card's A tier. Little Pegasus. This card is pretty scary alone. I thought this card would be more impactful, and we saw a lot of green steel with this character early on, and I still think this card is very competitive and viable. I think that Pegasus, this card, I like when my mic cuts off middle of me talking, but I like that I think this card will always be viable in a metagame. Just being a 1/1 evasive and having a really strong shift target in the future. I also think this card is A tier. I don't see this card not seeing play for a very long time, honestly. I think it's just good aggro. The Fates, when you play this character, look at the top card of each opponent's deck. I said knowledge is power, but let's not go too crazy. Seeing what is on top of your opponent's deck and what they're going to draw next turn isn't as impactful as seeing a hand of 7. So, like, yeah, you get to see what's coming up, but so you know what their next draw is. But I'd rather just play the Diablo anyways and see 7 cards versus seeing 1 card. So this card, it's not even really that good of a stat line. Like maybe if this was a 2/2 or something, which then maybe it's just outclassing the goons. I don't know. This card I just don't think is ever seen any play competitively or even casually. It's not a card I even want to draft unless I don't have any one drops. We'll put this in F tier. Ursula's Trickery. Each opponent may choose to discard a card. For each one who doesn't, you draw a card. Um, it's basically a minus or it's a break even card. It's not really seen in any kind of competitive play or casual play. Well, this is F tier as well. Hidden Cove. All right. When we talk about cards that made an impact on the meta, this is a card that I'm talking about. This card single-handedly allowed greens a steal, in my opinion, outside of Bucky stuff. This card allowed make all red cards almost obsolete, or a lot more effort to get value out of those cards. Hidden Cove is probably top 5 cards in this format. And that, like, in this card allowing you to prevent Diablo from getting hit by Brawl. So that way, so you play this on turn 3 with your or turn 2 on with Diablo and move him there if you need to. Like, I this card's phenomenal. Giving you +1 and +1 attack and defense. You would not think that this card would be that impactful, but it's got a great stat line at 6, like to protect you for 6 damage. It's a lot. I mean, yeah, it dies to Maui, but like you're okay with, like, other than that, not many things easily trade into it. So this card is S tier for sure. I think this card just single-handedly allowed Green Steel to start dominating. Like this in combination with the other green cards that were coming out this set, with the Diablos, with how oppressive Buckies were, with how many like low drop Bloodborne characters there were. I think this card is a Hall of Famer for this set. We're gonna put this in S tier. Gus, he's just a 2/3 goon or 2/3 vanilla. So yeah, probably D or F tier at best. Pete, whenever this character quests, while he has 5 attack more, return chosen character with 2 or less to their hand. A lot of words in this guy. Pete deck coming up, incoming, so it's going to be interesting to see what people start doing with him. He can see some play in like an Alice and green deck, and just because you're getting a lot of support energy with him. So he can be pretty decent, but I think that the fact that he's uninkable kind of steered people away from really wanting to try anything with it. He's got a decent stat line, but for a 2-drop as well. I mean, he's basically just Gus, just uninkable, and then you can make him better, which will allow you to bounce other things. So, like, you play a, I don't know, like, the problem is you don't really get anything on curve with support. So, like, turn 1, there's not a character that quests for, or I'm sorry, with 3 attack that can support Pete to get this card viable on, like, turn 3. So because of that, I think this card is probably D tier to be generous, because there can be some viability, but you're not playing this card on curve efficiently, and the fact it's uninkable just stops it. I would say this card is F tier. I can make an argument if I was paid to say this card's in D tier, but this isn't a card I want to draft, and it's not really a card that I want to play. Dodge! Every time I see this card, I think of Piccolo. Why didn't you dodge, Gohan? And chosen character gains ward and evasive until the start of your next turn. I thought this card would be a little bit more viable because it's kind of the mindset of like, okay, they're gonna bring out their Diablo, and now I can trade my 1-drop 2/2 Robin Hood into their Diablo by playing this card, and it's a trade. But it doesn't do like, so yeah, I get to out their Diablo, but this is still a card that I have to pay to play in my hand, so I'm still kind of going negative, and I'm trading in like this card. I'm glad it exists, but it didn't make an impact on the meta. I think this card is D tier because it's great in like a sealed format as well. And I'm glad this exists because it'll eventually need to be really, really viable, I'm sure, at some point. But nobody played this in any kind of competitive deck, and it's kind of interesting to see why. I understand why, but I don't think this is a bad standalone card. There just usually needs to be other things, and you can't expect to see Diablo every single time on turn 2, especially if you didn't go first. Make the potion, banish chosen item, or deal 2 damage to chosen damaged character. Unviable, I think. I think the song is better to deal to banish a chosen item from like last set where he has my heart. The 2 damage to damaged characters isn't viable yet. I think that with the new Robin Hood support coming out next set, it'll probably be better. But overall, the fact this is uninkable and needs to choose one, I just think this is an F tier card. Hidden Incaster. So I was hyped for this card. I thought this card was going to be huge this set. And everything I did, I could not make this card competitively viable. I wanted to try and make like a green and blue item deck with this to play a lot of like the good high costing item or green characters that were all uninkables. I tried a deck with like 30 uninkables. I'm like, this is gonna be great. I just have to hard mulligan for like a Fishbone Quill or Hidden Incaster, and I'll be completely fine because all these uninkable cards are so powerful. This card's gonna be great. This card's not great, unfortunately. I wanted this to be so much better, and honestly, it'll only get better with time. But this card did not see any competitive play at all. And it's so disappointing because it's such a cool card. I didn't expect to see a card like this so early on, but it made no impact. And this is a promo card too. Like it just made no impact in our meta at all. It's a D tier card, and it hurts me to say this because I want this card to be better than what it really is. We'll say D tier, unfortunately. I don't have the heart to put it in F tier, but yeah. Signed contract. Whenever your opponent plays a song, you may draw a card. So, if side decking was a thing, this deck card would be amazing. I think this card is really neat, but just we're not seeing too many song decks. Other than we see Green Steel that has a couple different songs, and yeah, you'd be able to draw with it, but this card just might be too slow. Playing this on curve feels bad, and you feel like you're behind. And then Green Steel doesn't need to play songs, and even if they do allow you to draw, chances are they're going to let you discard afterwards. So like or force you to discard afterwards. So I signed contract. This is a good draft card. I think this can be more viable in the future when we really start. If Steel Song ever becomes a massive, massive problem, then I think this can be splashed into a couple green decks to help counter it. But because there's no side deck in Lorcana, we're gonna say this card's D. Diablo. If it wasn't obvious about all my talks about this card and having to build around it, this is a card that defined the format. Any decision you made, you had to say, can this help me does my deck have an out to Diablo consistently? You had to build your decks with the idea that this card is coming out on turn 2, and if I do not deal with this card by turn 3, I am going to lose because they are going to have so much more draw and so much more advantage, and I can't deal with it. This card, the format was based on this card. All your deck building decisions were, how does this help me out Diablo or not? And so I don't think I have to go crazy in depth with it, but this is an S tier card, and I don't know if anybody would really disagree with me. And if you do, you're wrong. This is S. Like top of S tier. Hey, Bumbling Rooster. I was playing around with this card early on. I actually really like this, and I really want to see more cards like this card. I think that because Lorcana has a going first meta, that we need to see more cards that say when your opponent has more ink than you, do X. And I think those kind of cards are really important, so that way it'll start incentivizing, well, if there's more cards that will allow me to do stuff when my opponent has more ink than me, then I should just start going second because I'm going to get that full benefit out of those cards. I'm really excited to see more cards like this in Lorcana. I think it is very important for a healthy metagame that, like, oh yeah, all these other decks want to go first, but if green's just like, hey, like, I'm behind on ink than you, and I have a lot of cards that say I get a really cool effect when I'm behind, I think this is great. This card is really strong. Unfortunately, just never made a big impact on the meta. It's a little bit too slow just now because it comes out on turn 3, but you can't technically really play this until turn 4. So, and by turn 4, there's just so many more important things that you need to do. I love the fact this is inkable. It does quest for 2, so it's a good aggro target. I think this is a C tier card right now, but I can see this card being a lot more valuable in the future, and it's Hey, I'm just waiting for a Floodborn Hey. Hera, Chosen Zeus's get ward. Hercules get evasive. 1/3 for 3. She does quest for 2, and she has her own ward. This is a good in theme decks. It's not a bad card as a standalone. There's just better things to be doing in green. Green just came out with so many better cards this set that you don't really need to play this, and you're not really playing Hercules because Robin Hood is so much better in most cases for like a 1 and 3 drop. Zeus isn't really seen as a viable option for any deck right now either. So this card could possibly get better in the future, but this card is probably, I would say, F to D tier right now. Shock, Connoisseur of Climbing. So this card's seen a lot of play in like the green-purple decks. When you play this character, chosen character gains Reckless, so it kind of forces you to attack, hey, I have my Cursed Merfolk, I have my Flynn Rider, make you discard something. So it can be pretty good, and it's got a good stat line, so it's just a more aggro-focused deck. But I think overall this hasn't been anything too crazy. This is one of the first cards I'd recommend cutting if you're playing like green-purple or something, and you're like, oh, I don't know what to fit, I don't need to do this. I'm like, do you really need Shock? I don't feel like you do, because half the time, I don't really want you killing my Flynn Riders and stuff like that. Like, I want a quest for 2. Like, the discard's not going to matter that much if I'm beating you by turn 6. So I think this card has seen some competitive play, so it's got to earn a spot higher than C, but it can't go higher than B tier. Meg. I had a lot of people requesting me to make decks built around this card, and when you play this character, not this card, the other Meg, When you play this character, choose and discard a card or banish this character. When you play this character, choose and discard a card or banish. Like, this has an obvious drawback, but it's got a really good, strong stat line. The fact that it's uninkable is a little bit of a bummer, but if you've dropped the Diablo early on, then I think this card can be actually pretty decent. It's a pretty big threat, especially if you're playing an aggro list. If you have your Diablo out, you're drawing a lot more cards than you'd really want to anyway, than you like deserve to draw. But this card overall has made really no impact at all. It's not something you really draft for either, which is kind of shocking. Um, I'm gonna say this card's F tier. Pain, just the vanilla aggro card, F tier again. Maybe D tier if you're playing in a sealed format. Zeus, whenever this character challenges another character, he gains attack equal to the chosen attack. I would think this card would see more play, but the fact that he doesn't have Rush is a big reason why. Um, this card could have filled a big niche that the game really needed for green. Um, I would have loved to see this card say Rush. Maybe if it had like a 2 stat line or something instead, like 2 defense or willpower, then we could have seen something like that. But unfortunately, just not good enough. So we're going to put this card maybe into D tier, I think, at best. Vision Slab, I like this card a lot. I actually thought this would be better, and I tried making it work in that green item deck. At the start of turn, if an opposing character is damaged, gain 1 lore. I'm telling you this, I'm going to be playing this next set with my Robin Hood deck. Is Flute good? Yes. This card is inkable Flute in a sense if you're playing a damage focused deck. So as long as you're not killing off and finishing off characters, you're going to gain some passive lore. I don't know if it's amazing, but I don't think this is bad. But as of right now, it's made no impact whatsoever, and you're probably not playing this even in a draft format. This is F tier currently. Gunta, Interior Designer. When this character is challenged and banished, each opponent chooses one character and returns that card to their hand. So this does allow you to bounce like different characters, like a rabbit or something if you're playing purple. Like when I say green purple, that's typically what I think of versus green steel, just because one of my buddies plays it, and we look at different options. This card will never be seen in green steel because you often don't want to bounce your own characters, but green purple I can see this being played. But nobody has, and I don't think anybody really will. Again, turn 4 is just really important, and you don't need to play this card. There's just better options in most cases. It's not too strong of a stat line, and this can be his effect can be a drawback for yourself where you didn't really want to bounce your own characters. So because of that, I'm going to say this is F tier. Hades, we got another legendary. This is a card that will only get better as time goes on, and I love the fact that this card exists, but it is not a card that made any impact whatsoever. Nobody is playing this competitively. Nobody's really even playing this casually. This card just doesn't, there's not enough good target options yet. I think that is going to change next set. If you have I'm hunting for foil copies of this card because I want a playset of this, because I think with the new Robin Hood set, this card can be crazy viable. But it's made no impact right now, so I'm gonna have to say it's a D tier possibly. I don't want to go lower than D tier for sure. Panic. When this character is exerted, you have a character named Pain. In play, your villain characters can't be challenged. It's another F tier card in my opinion. I mean, just four drop, 3/3, quest for 2, and very situational effects. Yeah. Pete, vanilla, 2 quester, again, 4 drop, not just better options that you want to play. And we'll say that is probably another F tier in my opinion. Prince Philip, your other heroes gain Ward. So Ward has obviously been a problem this set, and I think a lot of people appreciate how devastating that card that like Ward can really be. But do you need all your heroes to have Ward? Is this card worth that 4 drop slot? And the fact that he's uninkable, it means you have to really focus in on the Ward hero deck. I am curious to see a Prince Philip deck. We are obviously keep on getting Prince Philip support, so they're trying to make him work, but most of them are uninkable, and it's just he does have a Floodborn, but at the same time, the card effect is really strong. Why would I want to shift into it something? So I don't know, man. Like I can see where they're going with this card. But he just doesn't pass the Medusa test, and so like because of that, I think he's just D tier again. And I'm being generous with D tier. I think maybe F, but we'll say D. The Muses. I thought this card would be see a lot more play than it has, and it does see play. This card has been a staple for like yellow green, so lemon lime has been great with this card. I have play tested this with green purple. I've play tested this with the green steel and playing a more song focused version of that. This card is great overall. Just being able to bounce something with 2 or attack or less to your hand. It is chosen character, not opponents. So the fact that you can bounce your own cards is a viable thing. So you can play like a cloud kicker afterwards and bounce it, so that way you have some extra removal to deal with Diablos if you don't have a good option. I don't know. Like there's a lot of viability, and when I say good 4-drops, this is definitely a good 4-drop. They have ward, they allow utility. This is a great card overall. I'm gonna say this card is probably high B tier, possibly A tier as well. Just never really got off the ground. I'm gonna say B because it's never got off the ground as like, oh shoot, this card is out on the field and everyone's afraid of it. Ursula's Garden. If you have an exerted character here, opposing characters get -1. I thought this card was pretty good. It is a 4-drop though, and it's kind of expensive. And it does give you the passive lore. Again, it's just a hard card to kind of play around because you're playing this on turn 4, and then you have to move something. If you play this on turn 4, you basically do nothing, and then your turn 5, you have to ink something and then move a character here just so that way they gain less lore. Well, if you kill your opponent's characters, then that means they're not questing for any lore. So why wouldn't they? And if they don't have a lore to quest with, then they're just going to attack this thing anyways. So I mean, it does buy you a few turns, but even if you're playing an aggro deck, everything's questing for like 3, which goes down to 2. So I don't know, man. I can see the niche of this card, but we'll say that is definitely more of an F tier card. Cricky. Card's kind of crazy. Allows better trades. It was a good alternative to the Cove kind of stuff, giving you +3, so that way you can just make some really valuable trades. This card has seen play in green steel. It's seen some play in green purple. This is just a really good card. Even after like its trigger effect, it's a threat on the field that is going to quest for 3. It does die to Medusa, so it does fail that test, but you can't win everything. I think this is a B tier card. Jasmine, when you play this character, and whenever she is challenged, each opponent chooses and discard a card. I wish this card was a Floodborn. If this card was a Floodborn, it would be phenomenal. And I think we would have been screwed with this format as a Green Steel, as Green Steel Bucky was killing us. So I'm glad it's not a Floodborn. But I think this card will see some better play next set, because it's not a bad. It is a on summon effect and a recurring effect. So discard's going to get a nice little boost with it. And she quests for 2 on top of it all. I think this card as a standalone individual card is probably around B tier, but it has not made any impact in our meta. I'm going to say C tier. I think this is a very good budget discard card that you can get. So if you need something to kind of help close out some games and you have your Prince Johns, then I think this is a card that you'll probably play. So this is the Meg that everyone asked me to build a deck around. Whenever you play a character named Hercules, you may ready this character. She does allow you to quest for 2. She does pass the Medusa test. She is a 5 inkable card. I think everything about this card is pretty good if you are playing a Hercules themed deck. Theme decks are their own thing. I think this is a C tier card. I do feel like a lot of people, like if you want to build something fun, this card with Hercules is pretty fun. Like, just what's more fun than questing a bunch of times in a turn? I think it's actually can be more consistent than the Beast discard deck as well. So like and like the Beast OTK deck, I think this is technically more consistent. You may not win in one turn, but this card's a consistent threat. It has ward, and then it can ready on its turn, and you just play a bunch of Hercules in your deck, and the Hercules cards are not bad. So I think this card is solid C. It can see some better play in the future, but as far as impact in the meta, maybe a D tier card, but it does have her own deck, so I'm going to say C. Pegasus, great Floodborn, great card to see. Gives all your characters evasive, so it answers the old evasive problem of Diablo. And then it does trade with the Diablo on turn 3, which is usually on curve if you played one. This card, I would say S tier. And I might get some flack for that one. I think Pegasus is an S tier card. It answers the other big problem card in the format. Unfortunately, they're the same color. but giving everybody evasive so that way you are able to quest with your Buckies and your Prince Johns and just a bunch of other stuff safely because they shifted into this card. This card has aggro viability. This card deals with Diablo. This card is a 5-drop, so that means you can sing, grab your swords if you are facing the mirror match. That way you get rid of Bucky and Diablo again, or sing Whole New World. Like, there's just so many viability. Like, this card has everything going for it. This is an S tier card for sure, and I think it made a more of an impact early meta before people kind of jumped on the Flynn train. I was riding Pegasus for a very long time. I love this card. I think it's an S tier. Tor. It's a drafting card. It's D. We don't talk about Bruno. So this card, I argued with my buddy for so long of why this card is good, and he's like, I don't want to play this card. I'm like, put this card in your deck. He's like, all right, I understand. And then like a few hours later, I understand why I'm putting this card in my deck. And then he would come back and he would be there. I think I need to cut on Bruno. Don't like go ahead and do that. Okay. He's starting like I'm starting to lose a lot. What can I do? I think you need to put Bruno in. I don't want to put Bruno in. Put Bruno in your deck. Okay, I understand why I put this card back in my deck. This card is great. So I this is your Dragonfire if you're a green steel. This is better than Dragonfire because you can sing it and it's inkable when it's not. Like if you open this in your top deck, like you have an inkable Dragonfire. That's great. So even if it doesn't hit it, I've literally had like I've seen it where this card has hit a random Be Prepared for myself. I'm like I need to bounce this random 2/2 goon on the field and take the 50-50 chance that you have that about that Be Prepared that I know is in your hand, and hitting that Be Prepared won me the game because I bounced a goon out of their from the field. So this card again has made a big impact on the meta. I do feel like a lot of people undervalue this, but this is again another S tier card from green in my opinion. I'm going to ride that train. This card goes into almost every one of my green decks that I'm playing, at least at 2. But I'm mostly playing this at 3 to 4 copies because there's hard reason to me not want to do it. Under the Sea. In Lemon Lime, this card is broken. Being able to play this on turn 2 is, or was it? No, yeah. Turn 1 is Kita. Turn 2 is Ursula. Turn 3 shift Kita and sing Under the Sea. That's crazy. And then you have full board control, whether you went first or second. Love this card. Glad it exists. I hate this card because it was burned on me a few times when I was playing Green Steel in tournament. But I think it's really important. It was impactful enough in the meta. This card allowed yellow-green to be competitive and have a strong match against one of the best decks in the format. Unfortunately, that deck's just not consistent enough to be like meta contention. But because of that, I think this card's a good B. Prince Philip, we kind of talked about Philip. He just never really made anything. This is the card like you shift onto that other Philip that's pretty good as a standalone card, but this is a shift 6. The fact he's a 9 cost means you do not want to hard drop this card. This card feels horrible if you're playing if you drop this on turn 9. When you play this character, banish all opposing damage characters, which means you have to have a lot of stuff going on, which means you have to play unoptimally. This card could possibly see some play next set because with all the Robin Hood and damage support we're getting, but this card made no impact whatsoever, and I felt horrible seeing a shiny one of these in my pack. This is a F tier card. All right, on to Ruby, one of my favorite colors. So Li Shang, because of the tournament that happened in, I think it was Paris or one of the big stream tournaments, this card seen a pretty big uptick because of the shifting, and we got to see Red Steel. Competitively, that deck didn't do very well, but it didn't actually affect the meta in a way of people playing this deck a little bit more viable because they saw how good it can actually be. This card definitely helped revive Red Steel this format. So because of that, I can say we can put this in a B tier as far as a goon. The shifting is relatively important, not too impactful. Getting to see a Red Steel hero deck, can't really put it higher than B tier though. Mulan, this character enters damage, which 2 damage. Healing. Red yellow, this card made a good impact with red yellow. Unfortunately, just that deck just lost hard to green steel, so we didn't see much of an impact. But in a bubble without Bucky, I think this card in yellow red can see a lot of play. The fact this card enters play damage, we saw how good that can be with Mother Gothel. We have plenty of healing cards that came out this set with the Julietas. We still have Rapunzel from that other set. So like playing this on turn 1 doesn't really feel that great, but if you do manage to heal it up, then I don't think it's bad. I've played this with blue as well, so getting to heal it off with a popsicle, and it can be viable to help make some early good trades. keeping her alive until turn 5 to see the real powerhouse is tougher with this card, so you usually don't play this on curve unless it's your only option for turn 1. But seeing this on turn 4 and having the other one in hand, it's okay. I think this card's a C tier though card overall. Imperial Proclamation's another card that I thought we would see a lot more, and in yellow-red, with getting that ramp, it definitely saw a little bit of play, but this card was often cut out quite a bit. So because of that, I'm going to say C tier as well. Vitalosphere did not find love until the end of the set, and I was praising this card for so long in the early set, and people thought I was crazy. I'm like, no, like if the format starts getting faster, I never really worried about Green Steel playing Ruby Sapphire at all. I felt like I had a very strong matchup with that deck, um, and it wasn't until I started seeing faster and faster decks, starting to see aggro Steel Song, starting to see purple green purple as an aggro list, that I'm like, okay, this card is a auto yes in my opening hand because I need to be able to out those cards with other characters right away. This card, I think, single-handedly kind of saved Ruby Sapphire in the meta as a top contender deck. Um, Vitalis Sphere is a card that will always be viable in Lorcana. Because of that, I'm giving this an S tier card. This card saved Ruby Sapphire from falling down into like a more obscure deck against some of the aggro lists, and being able to make those early trades and feel good, being able to make a better trade into like a Queen's Castle with like a Tamatoa that just spawned, or your dragon giving them rush right away after killing something and hitting a castle, um, taking out a McDuck Manor with a more optimal, giving you the +2. This card is always going to be good in Lorcana. It's going to kind of fluctuate as needed, usually against big locations. This is where it's really going to shine. Vitalosphere is an S tier item in my opinion. Training grounds, pay one, chosen character gets +1 strength. I do feel like giving characters +1 strength is pretty good, but it's chosen character here gets 1 strength. So once this is gone, I'm pretty sure that falls off. It's cost 1 to move it, and then cost 1 to activate the effect. So you're basically playing this card for 3 for 1 character to get 1. This is an F tier card, unfortunately. If it was just say characters here get 1 strength, I think that this card could have seen some competitive viability. Fa Zu, this character can't be challenged, and ready chosen character named Mulan. She can't quest for the rest of the turn. Mulan didn't make as big of an impact as we would have hoped, so this card doesn't really see any play whatsoever as well. Unfortunately, just not a good card. We're gonna say F tier because you don't even want to draft it. Flynn Rider. I think this is clear in S tier. This card is again just I need to. Do you have an out for turn 2 Flynn, turn 3 Sisu? Does your deck have that out? Because if not, you lose. This is another character that your decks had to be built around. Do you have those outs? Yes or no? And if it's no, 3 lore. So if you have the answer, awesome. This card's not that great. But oftentimes, if you don't have the answer on turn 3, this card just ramps you lore. The biggest card the only reason this card isn't better is because Green Steel was such a competitive deck, and everyone's playing, or even if Amber Steel, turn 3, let the Storm Rage on, pop the Flynn, no longer a threat. But then you had to deal with Sisu that next turn, which was a more of a threat. But then, so you're hoping you have the Zeus because otherwise they're getting 2 lore as well. So the card just constantly generated some kind of threat, and because you're just constantly dealing with the threats that are coming on board, you're allowing red decks to ramp up better to drop bigger, stronger cards that you don't have answers for. So because you're even if you have the answers for Flynn turn 2, Sisu turn 3, you are actively behind because you're not putting on any pressure on your board presence because you're just trying to deal with their problems. S tier card for sure. Khan, just 3-2 vanilla D tier because it's a fine in draft. Lumiere, this card I thought would be a little bit more competitive, and it saw some play early on for sure. But this is probably one of the first cards that people started cutting in Ruby Sapphire, or Ruby Amethyst, and Ruby Sapphire, just because like, oh yeah, +1 attack, this is really good. Now it's gonna help me block from not dying from Madame Medusa, or not getting hit by Brawl. But then this character dies from Brawl, and then all that stuff doesn't matter. Just It's a fine card. I'm glad it exists. Maybe C tier just to be a little generous to this card, but it didn't really make too big of a splash in the meta. This Mulan, whenever you play an action, this character gains +2. This card's I don't think seen really any play other than the fact that her name was just Mulan, so you can shift into the other one. So maybe. But I think this card overall is like at best low D tier. So I'm gonna say F. Pegasus. It wasn't the answer to Diablo. If you have an answer to Diablo, that's totally fine. And this card was seeing play for a while. We can probably put this into I would say A tier. I think this card is a standalone in answering the big problem and threats is worth putting this guy in A. Medallion Waits. I love this card. First off, I I'm playing a green red, which is not meta competitive, but oh my god, does this card just generate you so much advantage? And it's a surprise for a lot of people. So like if I said you're paying 2 to play it and then 2 to activate its ability to gain 2 toughness and draw a card, you're gonna be like that's pretty bad. But using this to like help deal with Sisus and Flynn's and like other problem cards that are on the field, giving my one evasive character a Pegasus um, enough of an attack boost to attack into the Diablo and then get to draw, although they get to draw too. Um, this card is great as a standalone. Unfortunately, as good as this card is, especially in a sealed format, this card made no splash in the competitive scene whatsoever. It did make a good impact on a casual experience, and it did make an impact on a sealed format. Like you want to draw a draft to this card in a draft format. I'm gonna say C tier because it's hitting 2 of the 3. It's hitting casual and it's hitting sealed. It just doesn't hit the competitive edge, so we'll say C tier. Snuggly Duckling Quack Quack. Shout out to Booker T. Whenever this character with 3 or more lore challenges the character here, gain 1 lore. If the character has 5 or more, then gain 3 instead. Or 6 or more, gain 3 instead. Not even really good to play in a casual deck. It's really hard to make work, unfortunately. I think that's because I can't really zoom in because I hate how landscapes are. Yeah, this card just doesn't really make. I don't want to play this in casual, sealed, or competitive. This is an F tier. Beast. That card enters play with 4 damage. I mean, turn 3 Beast, turn 4 heal with Rapunzel, draw 3 cards, attack some stuff. The problem with this card is 2 damage doesn't do enough on turn 4 to really help your board. If you are playing red, yellow, and you have the Rapunzel combo, this card's good. In any other situation, this card's pretty bad. So I think this card can probably be possibly C tier because it is only good in just red yellow if you're playing that line, but I'm not excited to see this late game. Uh, C tier is generous. Hercules, Rush, 3/3 with Rush, just he's Rafiki, just Hercules. It is another Hercules character if you wanted to play like a red steel Hercules hero deck, which is kind of neat. But otherwise, he's made no real play. He is good in sealed, so he gets a little bit of a boost because he's playable. We'll say he's in D tier. Li Shang. Okay, this card, in my opinion, almost revised the red steel line. Getting to see this card in action. Your character with the 4 more attack, you gain 1 more lore, so you're just being able to quest big with like extra heroes. If you're playing like Lumiere, then you get more options to like boost up the little attack bonus. But yeah, this card's pretty good. I think that because the deck is built around him, it's not seeing massive competitive play. But it's not a bad card in casual. It's not a bad card in sealed. Discarding a character card is pretty easy to do. I don't necessarily know if it's worth playing this card on turn 2 just to kind of get his extra effect, because you usually don't have anything on the field that's going to be able to quest for more than 1 anyway. So you probably play this on curve more than you shift. He's just kind of a weak stat line. I'm going to say this card is a C tier card still. I know I kind of hyped it up because of like, oh yeah, this card revitalized that deck, but just don't see him being the big impact standalone card. You are building a deck around him, but you're often not playing this on curve, and drafting into this card is a little bit tougher. You're really only playing this in that one casual deck. So I think C tier is as high as I can really put Li Shang. Amari, another bad what's it called? Last dragon character. During your turn, whenever this character deals damage to another character on a challenge, you may deal the same amount of damage to another chosen character. Yeah, I mean, deals 2 damage to something else, and it's uninkable on turn 3. Really bad stat line. Has lore for no reason. Like, get rid of that lore and just make it inkable, and maybe you'll see play. But yeah, we're gonna make that enough tier. Rhea, another bad dragon. Whenever this character challenges another character and gain 1 lore for each other damaged characters. At least this is inkable, so there's that. So I'm gonna say this is probably again. I'm gonna give this one the benefit, and we'll say D tier compared to F. Sisu. Um, this card, everyone was trying to make work in the early. So early set, this was the card you're building like. This is your answer to aggro early on. Playing the ice block into this. Play ice block turn 1. Play Sisu turn 3 to like help deal with something that's on the board. And like that way you can out your Diablo. It has evasive, so it can start questing and giving you a little bit of lore boost. This is one of the first cards that Ruby Sapphire opted to kind of cutting, and eventually Ice Block just cut that left the entire format. Uh, but with that said, I think this card definitely made a big impact in the early game. Our early set champs, not early set champs, early sets. So we'll say this is probably a B tier Sisu. This Sisu, on the other hand, is S tier. This card is insane. This card should be the one that is inkable, or non-inkable, in my opinion. This character quests for 2, gets an attack for each one. So you play the turn 2 Flynn, you play turn 3 Sisu with big cards in your hand. Yeah, this card, I really do think that both of these cards should probably be flipped in terms of viability or inkability. But this card is S tier. I think it's pretty. If you're playing Ruby Amethyst, I think any Ruby Amethyst player would agree. Tuk Tuk! I love this card. I'm glad it exists. Didn't really make any impact. We saw a red-yellow list that topped one time as kind of a good surprise with like the Flynn, or not Flynn, the locations and like the card trooper. And this card kind of helped that deck make that deck work. But this card feels bad to play on curve because you usually don't have a location to move something onto. I think this card will only get better in time, but this is probably like a C to B tier card at best. Brawl, S tier. Deals with Diablo, and very cleanly it deals with Diablo. And Flynn. Not much to really say. If you have Ice Block, this card is even better than at that point. Plank. Banish this item. Banish chosen hero. Ready chosen villain. It's hard to play. Pay 2. It's like an item, so it's a 3-cost item, and then you have to pay 2. This card is basically a 5-cost item to possibly banish a single hero. Just play Dragonfire. Like, this card's easier to, and like, just play Dragonfire. Benja, just vanilla. He's not bad, but he's not played. Probably decent in a sealed format. I don't think he's unplayable because he got a good stat line for a 4-drop, and being inkable is always nice. So we'll say that this one is probably a D tier. Super Goof. Another card that everyone was super hyped about early on, thinking that this card was going to be a great answer to some early game rush or early game aggro, giving you lore. This is the first thing that everybody cut. Just didn't have room in this in Sapphire, Ruby Sapphire. Didn't really see much play in like Red Steel, even though he's a hero. Like oh yeah, like but do we need him? The answer is no. You just don't really need this card, and the 2 attack is just too small. And unfortunately, even though he's flying, I feel like he should have evasive. If this card said rush and evasive, and he was just like a 2/2, this card would be insane. But because he's just kind of a rush character that gives you some extra lore, as a controlled character, a control player, that doesn't really appeal to me. So we'll say C tier because it's not a bad card. It's great in draft, but and I think it can see some viability, but I don't want to go higher than C tier. Noi, whenever you play an action, this character takes no damage from challenges this turn. It's a 4/4, so this card is not bad. In fact, this card can, I feel like, be really, really strong. You have to build a deck that has a lot of actions to really get some massive viability out of it, but it's a 4/4/4, can quest for 1. It is inkable. Noi, I would probably make an argument. And so it's made no impact on our meta whatsoever, but I don't think this is a bad card at all. We have to put it in D tier because it doesn't make Doesn't make casual decks, and it doesn't make competitive. So D tier it is because it's a playable card that you can build a deck around. Another Rhea, when you play this character, to write a chosen character of yours at a location. They can't quest though. So it just lets you fight along, which is kind of neat. It's another 4-drop, 3/3. Just not good enough stats, man. 4-drops just are so bad or so good. It's one or the other. I don't really see too many good mid-range 4-drops. So we're gonna put that in F tier. Tong, he has Reckless, 3/6 4-drop, which is bad again, F tier. B King Undisputed. So it is Lady Tremaine without the legs, without the quester, but man, this song help out a lot with dealing with Bucky. It is Ruby Amethyst really saw and took this cards to new heights, being able to control a lot of different things, being able to sing this song with like goats and stuff that are constantly on the field anyway, or rabbits. This card is just great. This is definitely an S tier song in my opinion. Hercules. Hercules. All right. This Herc's great. One shot's castle. That is literally all it's there for is the one shot castle. People were cutting Maui, who is arguably the best red card in the game, because this card one shots Hercules instead. I'm sorry, one shots Queen Castle instead, which was a huge problem for Ruby Sapphire. Really struggles against Ruby Amethyst. So this card was our answer to dealing with Queen's Castle because we do not have good outs for it. But because of that, I think this card made an impact. I'm going to say this card's A tier. He was a direct answer to a problem card in our format. Mulan, Elite Archer. I wanted this card to be a lot better, but and after when she first comes onto play and you shift her, hitting something for 5 and then hitting 2 other characters for 5, help clearing the board and giving you a strong body on the stat line feels great. Playing this card without shifting feels horrible. This card feels great when you shift. It feels horrible when you play it as on turn 6 because it does nothing until turn 7. But even then, it's gonna die to Medusa next turn anyways. Because of that, like this card just did not see competitive play at all. The fact that it's shift 5, it comes in really late to help deal with aggro. As cool as this card is, I do like unless you are able to shift her, she is useless till turn 6. Or I'm sorry, turn 7. She is useless until turn 7 if you have not shifted this card. And then you're going to deal 2 damage to a couple aggro characters, possibly not even hitting the board because they're all going to have like 3 health or something. Like you're dealing 2 damage to a couple mid-range targets. Yeah, unfortunately, this card has made no impact on our meta whatsoever. It's a card that you only draft because it's a legendary, and if you do manage to get a couple Mulans, then it might feel good to do. But this card's D tier, guys. I love this card. It makes a lot of impact. I actually play this card in my like green red deck and shift onto Morph, and run into it again. But if you don't get that shift line, this card feels so bad, and it's just ink. Yeah, we'll put this in D tier. Nessus, big stat line. It is great and constructed or sealed. That's about it. D tier. Pirate's Life. Each opponent loses 2 lore. You gain 2 lore. Neat card. The fact is only a sing-along for 6 isn't that bad, but usually there's just better stuff you want to be doing with your characters. Unfortunately, this card is F tier. I think it's a cool card. It's not impactful at all, and I don't think you're drafting this card unless it's last resort. Big Sisu. Oh my god. I think this card is clearly an S tier. Being able to shift. So the other 2 cards, one's a B tier, one's an S tier. And then this card right here who wipes out the board, shift on 6. If you manage to, this takes out the Buckies, this takes out Diablo. This card saves your butt against Green Steel if you're playing Ruby Amethyst or if you're playing Ruby Sapphire. This card is just your awesome board wipe to deal with so many big threats. S tier. Easy S tier. And that's all of our Ruby cards. Where are we at? 16. Wow, that was good timing for this one. So we made up some time, and we're gonna go over into the blue. All right, Fali 1/3 vanilla, F tier, D tier at best, just because it's a 1/3 stat, but there's better options usually. Olaf, it does have support. I love Olaf. I don't want to give him. I'm putting him in D tier only because I love Olaf, but this is probably one of the worst support cards in the game. Questing for one, giving somebody one extra attack boost doesn't really matter until like you quest this card for one on turn two. You're not getting any rush characters, so it's not really that viable. Unfortunately, we're gonna put it in D. He's an F tier card. Let's just admit it. Glenn, banish chosen item. Its player gains 2 lore. Um, this is a dangerous card to use on against your opponent. I think this card could have seen more play in purple or blue steel. I think this card is worth testing if you're a blue steel player, because I have made some plays where it's just sometimes you want that. It's not really a win condition card, but it can just close out the game. If you need a goat and you have like 8 items on the field not doing anything, and you've already lucky dimed, well, Glean's here to help you. Ice block. Um, in the beginning, this was an S tier card. Ruby Sapphire Sisu on Ice, as we call it, just kind of evolved to the point where we don't actually play this card through the meta anymore, which is shocking because this is a great card. If you would have asked me a month ago, I probably would have said this card is S tier, but everyone's kind of cut it from the deck, and I think the deck is better because you were able to cut this card altogether. You're still hitting the cards you need to hit, basically, with Sisu, without playing this card. I'm gonna still say it's A because this was dominating our early format, but it's not as impactful as we need this card to be anymore. I think A tier is still very respectable for Ice Block. I don't want to go any lower, but I can't justify and put it in an S tier. Anna, you have another hero character in play, gain +1 lore. Pretty good card. I do like this card a lot in the starter deck. I do like this in purple, like a Blurple deck. There's some good use that this card can have. I think it'll only get better in the future. If the other Anna was a Floodborn, like I feel like it should be, this card would be insanely good, I feel like. But even just as a 2-drop 1/4 who can quest for 2, that's a threat. So we're going to say this card is B tier. Aurora, she has Ward, 1/3. I do think that the 2/2 that quests for 2 is better than this card. Because having that little bit of aggro line is a little bit better, and most people aren't wasting their removal on 2/2 Aurora anyway, so the fact this card has Ward isn't anything. If this was Ward 1/3 with 2 lore, then yeah, but I think this card is D tier at best. Scuttle. A card that everyone was hyped about, but it's not as impactful as the Aerial. Same exact effect, just items. Turn 2, not like you played Vitalisphere on turn 1, then Scuttle turn 2, and then if you need to deal with something or there's a problem on turn 3, this card just often misses. You're not playing enough items in your deck to see the consistency of this card. Maybe Blue Steel can make this card work more, but we haven't seen as big of an impact. I think this is a C tier card. I think this is a card that everybody tried putting in their deck, realized that it misses more than it hits, and instantly kind of cut. I think the only deck this card can be played in right now is Blue Steel, and even then, you probably just want to play Smee. Another Tuk Tuk. It's cute, and it's just a vanilla F tier. Seldom they seem. Chosen character gets -3. It's a really strong ice block. It's a song as an ice block. This is a good late game card. Pretty bad early game. So we'll say D tier. Grottle. When you have 3 characters items in play, this location gains how much lore is it? 2 lore. Saw no competitive play whatsoever. Barely seen any casual play. Don't really want to play this in sealed format. As a standalone card, this is not bad, but it just doesn't do enough when it hits the field. Like this, you're not playing this on curve because it's a 2 cost, which means, and so if you play this on curve, that means you probably have 1 item at best. And then turn 3, let's just say that you play 2 more items down, but realistically you're probably turn 3 Fishbone, so that's only 1 more item. Unless you ink and then play another Popsicle, then you have your 3 items. Hooray! We got our 3 items. And then, but you wait until turn 4 to have 2 lore, to gain 2 lore out of this character, this thing. So you can kind of see the problem here. It doesn't do anything till turn 4 at best case scenario. And at turn 4, you've just put down a few items and a location that a location. Meanwhile, your opponent is dealing with Bucky and Diablo, and you don't have an out for it unless you just manage to top deck a Sisu later on. So this card is F tier. Flounder support. If you have a character named Ariel, pay one less. If this card comes into play on turn 2, that's not bad. I don't think there's a single one-drop Ariel though. So because there's not a one-drop Ariel, this card does not see play. Good enough reason. Otherwise you're just playing like the 2-drop Aurora, which means you have a shift target for a pretty strong card. Hans, again, good in the purple princess deck in my opinion. Not a bad card at all. Quest for when he comes into play, he's goat and gets the lore, and then he is a pretty decent threat with stats. 3/2 allows you to make some good trades if you need to, or just quest for 2 and play aggressively. Olaf shifting and discarding an item card. When he quests, each of your other characters gain attack equal to this character's attack, which is 1. And it's only until this turn. And basically, he's giving everybody support with a slightly stronger body. He does quest for 2. Not really worth playing, even in a theme deck, in my opinion. We're going to put that in F tier. Pascal, when you play this character, look at the top 3 cards and put them back in any order. Scrying is good. But again, kind of turn 3 just to look at your cards. This card doesn't do enough. Maybe if it had evasive, this card could have seen some play. In a sealed format, this card can see some play, but I think there are just better options to play on turn 3. So we're going to say D tier. Prince Philip, chosen whenever one of your characters is chosen for support, they gain resist. Neat effect. He has support. Just not good enough again. F tier. The Queen. So this card I think will be nuts next set because there's a lot of the Queen support coming out. This card says look at the top 4 cards of your deck. You may reveal an item card, put it into your hand. If that item costs 3 or less, play it for free instead, and it comes into play exerted. So this is Scuttle, but this is Scuttle on turn 4, and then it allows you to play that card for free if you do hit. There is a lot of possibility with this card. This is essentially a turn 4 play to get you a Fishbone Quill or something, hopefully. Without ways of stacking your deck, it's not crazy. However, I think Blurple can see some competitive use with this card in the future, especially with some of the other Queen support coming out. I think it's an interesting card, but it's made no impact at all this meta. I do see this card played in a blue steel, and it does all right. It's nothing crazy. I would say C tier at best as of right now, but I think there's some potential with this card a lot. Triton, turn 3. He's 3 cost, banish one of your items, gain 3 lore. That's pretty good. Why aren't we seeing more of this card? Because if you are playing blue steel and you have a bunch of items on the field, this card can close out, and it's not like he has a bad stat line. It's a 3/3. Do I want to waste removal on this guy? No. But if I don't, then they're going to gain 3 lore by popping a popsicle. And then you get the popsicle back with Tamatoa anyway. So, yeah. Or, hey, I have my Lucky Dime, and I activate Lucky Dime, target my Tamatoa or something else, and then pop my Lucky Dime for game. This card is scary. As a standalone individual card, this card is terrifying. I have no idea why people have not jumped on this card or tried really making this card work in a competitive sense. I'm missing something because this card's insane. I don't know why I'm not even playing it either. But yeah, unfortunately, it's really not made any competitive use. It hasn't really made much casual use. It's not something you often want to draft because you usually like your items in draft format. We'll say D tier. Field Device. This is a one of for me in a lot of my decks that I've just tried making work. Whenever you play a character, they gain a resist +1 until the start of your next turn. So it does kind of help if you're facing against a steel deck. If you're playing a heavy rush character deck, then this card's pretty good as well. I have experimented with this, and when it works, it works. It's just a dead card 9 times out of 10, though. I think D tier is fine. The Great Stone Dragon. This card is amazing because discarding decks exist. Without it, I would not think that this card would have made as big of an impact this set. Especially in Ruby Sapphire, this card just allows you to actually get value out of the cards that were discarded by Bucky. This card is an A tier card. Again, I think it just directly counters one of the best decks in the format, and because of that, I think A tier is completely fine. I can't justify saying that this is S tier purely because it's dead in Ruby Sapphire on curve 9 out of 10, and drawing this on turn 6, you usually can't really even play it optimally either. Um, but when it works and goes off, it's really good. So A tier is, I think, definitely good. And then with Blurple and a few other cards, like I think this card's only gonna get better in the future. Winter Camp, Hero Quest here, remove damage. F tier, doesn't do anything, it's just healing. Anna, True Hearted. Whenever this character quests, your other heroes get +2, which means, or +1 lore, which means that Anna, who has +1 lore from before, she's questing for 3 when this card hits the field. Um, really strong card. I like this guy a lot. We will say that this is a B tier card, I think. I think if you're building a deck around this character, it's really good. It's a step up from the starter decks. Um, it can be competitively viable. I think a lot of people didn't really give this card a fair chance. If you went with a blue hero deck, a blue steel hero, or seeing Blurple, I think this card is phenomenal. As a casual deck, this is a card I'd want to draft as well because there's just a lot of good low cost heroes that are here. Um, it's hitting 2 of the 3. It's not hitting the meta, but it's hitting casual and it's hitting sealed. So we're gonna put this in B. Aurora, one of the guys I play with at locals plays this card in Ruby Sapphire, and it always impresses me playing this card when he plays this card because it feels like it does so much. And just being able to stack your deck with by tapping a popsicle is really good. It just never survives that long in a mirror match. Maybe because every time I face him, I've been playing my own Ruby Sapphire, and so I'm like, all right, Medusa on the next turn, like on turn like 6, I'm popping it usually. Um, but this card is pretty good. I think it's a B tier. I think it's only, again, stacking and having your knowledge and like, okay, and especially if this card comes out late game where you're able to really search for those be prepared and stuff that you need on the following turns. I think is really important. But never really made too big of an impact. I would say this card's great casually, and this card is great as a sealed format. Hades, just vanilla, F tier. When this character is banished, she is Grandma Tala, but again, it's a 4 cost. 4 is just such a hard slot to fill, and unfortunately, this card does not fill that slot. So we're going to say F tier as well. Transform Chef. When you play this character, remove 2 damage from chosen character. Again, 4 slot, 3/3, quest for 2. Works in sealed-ish. At some point, you've probably traded. I'm going to say F still. Triton. I made a Triton deck. It's horrible. Don't play Triton, guys. My mic keeps cutting off as I'm talking, and it's kind of annoying. During your turn, this character gains evasive. Cool. It's a little late for an evasive character that you want, because you're not really going to be able to deal with threats until turn 5. But whenever one of your locations is banished, you put that card into your Inkwell face down exerted. Okay. This card, even in the Triton deck, I didn't really want to play this card. We're going to say this is D tier. Like, possibly F tier. Dang you. Other villain characters gain support. Why are villains supporting each other? That's off-brand. 3/5, 5-drop. F tier. Rapunzel, while you have a character named Pascal, this character gains ward. This is a questing for 3. In a blue steel aggro list, this card is actually pretty terrifying. I think, but anything else, it's not. I do not think this card has made any competitive viability, but in sealed, this card is terrifying. We'll put this in D tier. Ariel. Yeah, this card's insane. Everything about this card is really good. And the only thing that's holding her back is the fact she's not inkable. But if you're playing blue, you're playing Fishbone Quill or something. So I don't even think that's even that bad of a drawback. This thing basically says Lucky Dime for 5. Um, this is, and she has Ward, and she quests for 3. Like, this card is such a problem card. I got my foil set for her because I was expecting a little bit more. I was trying to make this work with the green item deck that I kind of mentioned earlier. But even still, just top decking this card and having a Lucky Dime on the field just says that I'm winning this game. So I think this card is an S tier card. Impact on the game, yeah, you're not seeing 4 of her in every deck, but you're seeing 2 or 3 copies in most cases because she can just win you the game against. If you're playing blue steel, you're playing this card. Ruby Sapphire had to kind of make a cut from her a little bit, unfortunately, but you can still slide her into a slot as a Tamatoa replacement and getting that instant 5 lore with Lucky Dime. Anything you're playing Lucky Dime, if you're playing Lucky Dime, you are playing at least 1 copy of this card, and otherwise I feel like you're making a mistake. I'm putting this Ariel as S tier. The worst of the Sisus, 6 drop, 6/6 for 2 lore. Just too expensive for a vanilla. Um, I'm glad this card exists. It's not a bad standalone card in draft, but it's just expensive. And thankfully it's inkable. But well, this is an F tier. It's a D tier card. Treasures Untold. Return up to 2 cards from your discard pile to your hand. I'd rather just play Tamatoa on turn 8. This is F tier. John Silver, 8/8, quest for 3 for 8. Terrifying in draft if you manage to actually bring this guy out. He's a game ender. But otherwise, we'll probably say F tier. Dig a little deeper. Okay. I could not find this guy's name anywhere, but he's been on Facebook quite a bit. There is a gentleman who's been playing Ruby Sapphire, and I saw his list that he topped at a set champion, or not the set champions, like one of the bigger tournaments, not set champs, the one above it. My brain's fried. I've been talking about cards for a while. And I was like, okay, how good can this card actually be? And so I saw his list. I'm like, okay, I understand why this card's in his deck. And so I took it to my next set championship the following day. And this card performed way better as a one of than I expected it to be. Being able to put cards on the bottom of your deck, and because I was scrying so much anyways, being able to see those cards again eventually was great. I was able to search out my Sisu when I needed to. I was able to search out my Be Prepares when I needed to. This card just let me get exactly what I needed when I needed it. And this card has won me games. I agree with the gentleman. I don't want to mispronounce your name. Sorry, man. But thank you so much for the input on this card. This, with that said, as far as meta impact, this is probably a C tier at best. This card just did not see the play until the end of the format, and Ruby Sapphire just kind of really fell off the format quite a bit, unfortunately. So I'm gonna say C tier at best, but I do want to give this card its proper respects. As a standalone card, this is a lot better, and if you haven't played with this card, experiment with it. It's pretty good. It definitely deserves a slot. Triton. Really cool legendary. This guy says opposing characters get -1, so he's just a permanent ice block on the field. Quest for 3. He is a massive stat monkey. He just doesn't do anything. -1 attack, and like at this point, I can't play removal cards, so I just have to make. Hopefully, they don't have a direct removal that's going to kill this thing. But if this guy survives on the field, he's pretty good. That's it. I mean, like, with that said, there are better casual decks, better casual cards that you want to put into like a blue deck. I don't want to draft this guy because he's way too expensive. The only reason I draft him is he's a legendary, but I'm not putting him in my deck because I'm not getting to 9 ink. And in competitive, he definitely missed the mark as well. I would say this card is D tier at best. It's realistically probably an F tier legendary though. All right, let's cross this finish line. Let's get on with the steel lists. So Aladdin 1/3 vanilla. This one's not played. Even though we're seeing the 3/3 steel, this one just never really saw play, and I don't think it needs to see the play. It's a fine card. It's just a D tier 1/3. Triton's Decree. A lot of people were playing with this because it isn't out to Bucky. Each opponent chooses one of their characters and deals 2. If your opponent did not have a 1-drop and they played the Bucky on turn 2, or if you're able to deal with their 1-drop somehow, then this card is great. This is a Bucky killer. This card is designed to kill Bucky. I appreciate it. I'm glad it exists, and it probably has helped people like take care of their Bucky problem early on. But it just didn't really make too big of an impact on the steel players. I don't think that, like, in green steel, you're definitely not playing this card. Just uninkable, and there's better options usually. You want to basically be able to sing grab your swords later to deal with Bucky. I'm going to say this card is a C tier card because it's definitely respectable. But this is just, it's a card that you will often cut 9 times out of 10. Fortisphere, this is S tier. Blue steel is crazy, and it's crazy because of this. Not only do you have your popsicles that let you draw a card and get you into your stuff, you have this other Fortisphere card, which is another cheap item that you're drawing cards off of. Fortisphere S tier. The only complaint I have is I don't know why a lot of people didn't try out this card in Amber Songs, because giving some certain characters bodyguards to protect your singers I felt like would be really viable. And I've experimented with it and it's not bad. I think there are better options overall, but the fact that I didn't see anybody really playtesting this in that list annoyed me because I felt like it was okay enough to really try. But otherwise, this card isn't broken as all hell in blue steel. S tier. Argus, I've seen people playing this as a counter to Flynn. So funny enough, this card is a target. It deals with Flynn, it deals with Sisu as far as a direct removal, and they don't have an out to it, so Flynn just kind of sits there awkwardly while Argus just yells at them. So I think this card is fun C tier. It's an interesting tech card for sure. Magic Brooms, great. It is the Brooms deck I answer to Diablo. Um, Inkable 2/3, good stat line. Yeah, this card's just great. We'll say this is an A tier card. It allows Steel players to answer the Diablo problem and having an Inkable option. This is not a bad card to play in, not just Brooms, but just like Red Steel, Blue Steel, Green Steel. Like this is not a. It's a good option to deal with Diablo. Mickey Mouse, standard bearer. When you play this character, chosen character gets +2. I thought this card would be more impactful, and it's funny too because next set we're getting a card that says give in character +2 and then draw a card. That does it for it's like a Jafar action, and this card just does that on legs basically. So like I think this card's pretty good as like a strong like drop to help deal with an early threat. Didn't really make much of an impact in the meta though. I'm going to say C tier because I think this card needs to be respected a little bit more, but it didn't make that big of an impact. Imperial Bow, chosen hero, gains challenger +2 and evasive this turn. Um, it's it is a turn 3 answer to Diablo, but often you just don't play this card. You don't really need the item evasive stuff. Like it, there are better things to do. Like I'd rather play any of the songs instead. Thebes. Whenever a character is banished in a challenge here, gain 2 lore. Didn't see any real play, even like casual play. There's not really a reason to play this deck. I feel like. Okay, I have seen people play it in the red steel. I don't think it's a good option in red steel at all. The only saving grace is it only takes 1 to move here. So we'll say D tier. Aladdin, S tier. Bucky, turn 2, Bucky Diablo Shift. Turn 3, Aladdin. That's 2 cards discarding. I'm drawing cards with Diablo. That is this card. I personally, when I first saw Bucky, like set 2 Bucky, I told myself this card is going to be insane as soon as there is a turn 2 or turn 3 Floodborn. Like it's going to be it's going to be bannable. We had a turn 3 Floodborn, and the fact that this card is a great stat line, it's inkable, it directly counters the deck that beats Green Steel the most in Ruby Sapphire, as a direct counter for that. On top of being a Floodborn that makes them discard, this card is insanely good, and it was exactly the card that they wanted to see on turn 3 because that's when the blue is playing their Fishbone. And so if you're going first, you play this card. I don't want to play my Fishbone now because Fishbone's going to be a pop, so which means I can't ramp to get to my Be Prepared, which means I'm going to be more behind than I need to be. Card is busted. This is an S tier card. This card right here is a F tier card. Whenever you play a song, you may draw a card, then discard a card. This Ariel is not a singer. I think if this had the singer 5 tag, it would actually see some play. But otherwise, this card's pretty bad. Resist Beast. We actually, this is it. So everyone's like, oh, we need a good beast. We need a good beast. And we keep on saying like lower cost beast. And like, not that one though. Not that one. This card's good in draft. Not really. You don't really need to use this on as a shift target because beast is so good. Like the sad hero beast is so good anyways that you don't need a shifting target. But this card's only really good in draft. So we'll say D. Chifu, while this character has no damage, he gets +2 lore. Kind of neat. He has he doesn't have much synergy with himself. He just doesn't do anything like as a standalone. So on turn 4 you're able. He's basically, if you think of him as a quester on turn 4, a 3 questing character on turn 4, I think that's fine. He's not bad, but he doesn't really make any meta impact. He can't really be played in a hero deck or anything. He's not a hero. He just doesn't make any major impact. I think he's a fine draft card, so we'll say D tier again. LeFou, this card says free and it's not played, and it bugs me when things are like that. During your turn, if you may play this character for free, if opposing character has been banished this turn. Um, he's got a good stat line for a 3-drop. He's inkable when he's not viable. Uh, I I would say this card's C tier at best, or I don't want to say at best, but like I think there's potential for this card to be a B tier card. At the moment, though, it just never really saw some meta play at all, which just shocks me. Like, it says free, play this card for free. You're often be able to make a good trade on turn 3. So I play this in purple steel. I think it's pretty good, but I've been wrong before. Your other heroes get +1. He is not a your hero characters get +1. He's not a hero, which is sad. He's fighting for his nation. He is a hero. Okay, like Ravensburger, I feel like you should be giving these guys hero tags. Just because they're a foot soldier does not make them less of heroes. He's literally being bombarded with arrows, risking his life. He is a hero of China. Period. But anyway, your heroes get +1 attack. Kind of synergizes with that red steel hero deck. I like this card a lot. It's probably a C tier card though. Luis Madrigal. While you have another character in play, this gets +2. That means it doesn't die to Medusa, so therefore it's a good card on turn 3. One Last Hope. Character gets +2 and may challenge opposing character, or challenge a ready character. Another answer to Bucky that nobody really seemed to play for some reason. I mean, it's uninkable and it's resist 2. Yeah, I mean, this card, we had answers to Bucky. Everybody knows that. We had answers to Bucky, right? We just chose not to play them because they were quote-unquote bad. This card did not see competitive play in Steel, and that is everybody else's fault. I think if we started seeing this card more often, then Bucky probably wouldn't have been as big of a threat as we let it become. It didn't make any impact in the meta though, so based on our rating, this is a D tier card. RLS Legacy Cannon. This card is probably the worst card printed in Lorcana. So pay 3, make this card uninkable, then pay 2 to discard a card to deal 2 damage. Until there is a card that says gain X effect for when this card is discarded, this card will never see play. Just play cannons. It is way better. This card, if this card said tap, discard a card and deal 2 damage, it would be good / okay. But the fact you have to pay an extra 2 and go negative in card advantage to deal 2 measly damage, this card is so unplayable, it is a joke. This is the worst card in Lorcana. This goes below F tier. This is a what the hell are you thinking Ravensburger tier. Like, this card is unplayable. Donald Duck. Probably the worst legendary. During your turn, whenever character banishes in a challenge, your other characters gets +1. It is a pirate captain, and Steel does have pirate stuff. But even in my pirate decks that I was building on a theme, I could not fit this card into that deck. It's just not good enough. The stat line's not good enough. This is. I will say that this is an F tier legendary, unfortunately. It's not good casually. You don't play this. Whenever your character banishes and challenge your other. I mean, I guess you can play this in sealed. We'll say D tier. Only because the seal, it's not a bad standalone character in a sealed format. Mulan 3/6. This card is actually a good vanilla. Something that you would actually consider playing. If you're playing the red steel, I think that this being a strong 4 drop that you don't really people aren't going to have a clean out for, and then shifting onto it. But even if you don't have a clean out for this card, and this just has to sit on the field to make some trades, I don't think this is a bad card. I think this is a C tier. Phil, um, it has a whole deck based around him. Your other heroes characters gain Challenger 1, and whenever you play a hero, gain 1 lore. So, and that's not a once per turn. That's just play a lot of heroes late game, and you can get some extra lore. I think this is an A tier card. I can't go higher and I can't go lower. The higher would say that this was dominating the meta. Lower is saying that this card isn't. You can build a couple decks around Phil, and I think all those decks can be competitively viable. You're not topping an LCS with them or something, but you can make any Phil deck I think relatively viable. As a win your league or win your set championships with a Phil deck. I do think that like you can win at a local league like I'm sorry, a local set championship. I think Phil decks can actually win, especially Blue Steel. So I'm gonna say A tier. Raja, while you have no cards in your hand, characters with 4 or less can't challenge this character. Um, F tier. I mean, it's not a bad stat line on turn 4. It's just another. There are better things to do. And it's very situational. You don't really want no cards in your hand. This card makes me wish that the Tiana card from the set previously, where it says if you have no cards in your hand, can't do actions. I wish that card was a Jasmine now because at least that way they would synergize. Uh, this should have been like a Princess and the Frog kind of card, and I think it would be cool. Yao, he's not again. He's a soldier fighting the Huns, defending his country, but he's not a hero apparently. Challenger +2. Unfortunately, this one's just not as nearly as good as the other one. It's not as impactful. This is probably F tier. Just not really seeing play. I don't really want to draft this card unless it's like one of the last cards in the pack either. So the only thing kind of that's saving him is that he's inkable at least. Avalanche. I'm gonna say Avalanche is A tier. Um, when Cove came out, this was a direct counter that said, I'm going to deal with Bucky and that annoying card that is protecting all of your other characters. It is technically a cheaper version of Grab Your Swords as well. Like, the only thing that kind of stops it is I wish this card was a song in some form, but if this card was a song, it would have been busted. So Avalanche, I think, it definitely earned its spot because it was the quote unquote Bucky killer in the mirror match. People were teching this card in specifically to deal with Bucky and have that out. And this card is great against Queen's Castle. It's great against any location deck that's going to come out in the future. Uh, I th- I know people aren't playing 4 copies of this really right now, or as the set champs kind of moved on, we weren't really playing this card too much. But I think this card made such a splash in the meta, and it was a direct card that was countering and being played and being considered even by your opponent. I'm like, okay, well, if they have Avalanche, I can't put this guy here because then it's going to do this. Um, I think this is a solid A tier. Finum Platinum. Banish all items. I love this card. This is a one of in every steel deck, in my opinion. If you're playing against blue steel, if you're playing against any like item focused deck, then you want to see this card. And if you're not, it's ink. Like, this is one of the actual situational cards that are inkable, which is blows my mind that Ravensburger doesn't do it more often. Um, so this is definitely I think this is a tier card as well. I think it's an A tier card. Now, as far as impact on the meta, didn't really do as much, and people were not as high on this card as I am. I'm gonna put this in B tier because it definitely made it. This single card destroys Blue Steel and can devastate Ruby Sapphire. All you have to do is put 1 copy of this in your deck and hold it if you're playing against those colors, and you will likely win once you decide to trigger this. The Wall, this card made no impact whatsoever. F. Chen Po, Bodyguard, another soldier being attacked, but not a hero apparently. He's Bodyguard. This is a great draft card. I love this card in draft. But this is something I would like. This is the first common I'll grab out of the pack most likely, and probably more times out of the other. Like this, if I'm actually trying to win, this is something I'm grabbing over a rare. 4/7 body, 5 stat line. Like this character is overstated, but I love it. So he is probably I'm gonna say this card is a C tier card because it is casually viable in my opinion as well. Li Shang, hero captain, just vanilla 5/5/5s. Draftable, yes. He is a hero. I'm gonna say D tier. Mickey Mouse, Playful Sorcerer, B tier. When you play this character, deal damage equal to the number of brooms you have in play. You're most likely playing this on turn 5. I don't really see too many on curve hits with this guy, and so you're usually doing like 2 or 3 damage to something. I think this card, it's removal and it's inkable and it gives you recursion. It gives you a good board presence. This card's pretty solid. The only thing is it dies to Medusa, which everything does in this game. Piglet. Um, while you have no cards in your hand, this character gains can challenge ready characters. He is a hero. I love this. I wish this card was inkable. If this like take away a lore pip and give me the inkable, and this card is great. It is phenomenal in draft. It can be casually competitive, so we're kind of up at least into C tier. Do we put it higher than C tier? I don't think so. I think you can have him as a splash surprise card. And if you're not playing a deck, a quote unquote meta deck, then you're very often out of cards anyways. So emptying your hand is okay. He will trade with the cards that you need to trade with, anything that has ward. The problem is, though, he doesn't deal with aerial, which is another problem at ward card. But I think he is good enough to say C tier. Not quite high enough for B, though. Aerial Sonic Warrior. I splash her in as a one of in my Steel Song deck, and when this card is hot, it is hot. When this card is cold, it is cold. But if it's cold, it's ink. But the fact that you can play this on curve with the really, really good aerial card is awesome. Playing this turn 4, singing some songs, clearing out the your opponent's board. If you play this on curve and you have songs in your hand, obviously turn 4 you're not being able to trigger her effect, but like turn 5, if this thing survives on turn 5, you are able to start clearing their board very, very easily. I think this card didn't make as big of an impact as I would hope this would have done. I think as a card, this is an A tier card. As impactful, I would say B tier. Herc Bodyguards. I started seeing this card in Blue Steel, which is an interesting choice because, I mean, pretty good card. It means it resists. It's got a good stat line. It drops out. Like, this is an interesting card to me that people were really starting to jump on this guy late game, like late into the reset. I would say that this card is high C, low B. It is a very interesting tech card. I haven't seen it make as big of an impact. It has won my buddy a few games who's playing Blue Steel because they just didn't have an answer for it, and he's able to quest it out and protect his Tamatoas and everything else. So, or not Tamatoa, it's really like protecting his Smees and like low cost. So like I think in a Blue Steel aggro list, this card's really good. Magic Broom. This character gets +2 for each other Magic Broom you have in play. It is resist. This card doesn't really do anything on impact, though. I don't think this is the Broom's deck's best Broom, but I think it's because it's a Magic Broom in name, it's still viable. This is I don't want to say it's the worst Broom card, but it's not. It's probably on the lower tier of that. I'm gonna say C tier because you are playing this in the Broom deck, but even I don't even know if you're really playing this in all your Broom decks. Rhea, Challenger, resist. During your turn, whenever this character banishes another character in a challenge, you may draw a card. Why can this not be a Floodborn? Give me a good Rhea card. Like, it is something on challenge that could trigger. So you're not doing anything with this card till turn 8. But on turn 8, you're getting hit with Dragonfire from Ruby. You're getting hit from with Medusa. This card just does not see anything. If this card could have been a Floodborn, I think it would have been really good. And Rhea could have actually saw some play. But unfortunately, this card is probably F tier. Mob Song. I'm surprised this card didn't see more play at all. I actually did expect to see some hits, but honestly, Steel Song just has so many good cards that they don't need a 10 song to like ping 3 damage / locations. This card is probably F tier, honestly, which is really shocking because looking at it at first glance, I thought it would be really good. It's just a little too expensive. You need to have like 2 aerials on the field to sing this and get some real value. But at the same time, would I have rather just played Grab Your Swords and let the Storm Rage on to finish off something? Probably. So we'll put this in F tier. And holy crap, guys, that is the definitive 100% true and honest tier list for set 4 Ursula's Return. I had to think about it for a second. For Ursula's Return. Did you agree? Did you what's the opposite of agree? Did you complain about my decisions and why are these cards S tier and why are these cards are F tier? Tell me what you would change. Let me know. I did this in a little bit of a different format versus using Tier Maker just because I felt like this was being able to really see the card more visibly. I felt like was more important. So if you like this format better, let me know. If you hate it more, then we will go back to the next one for set 5 after. So until then, I will catch you all later next time. Peace out. Love you all. Mwah. Enjoy set 5.